Hi, it's Rob Moore here and welcome to the Podcast Online Summit Day 2. So yesterday we covered setting up your podcast, the equipment, the minimum viable equipment you would need, the opportunity that podcasting brings and the massive opportunity for you to be an influencer via a podcast. Hi, if you're tuning live on Facebook, we have a YouTube stream and a Facebook stream running simultaneously. Welcome to day 2 of the Podcast Online Summit. Thank you and well done for getting on because we don't share recordings. It's only live content from this live stream studio. We covered yesterday the setting up of your podcast, the equipment, the minimum viable gear that you need, the great opportunity in the podcasting world, how it's becoming one of the biggest, if not the biggest, media and social media channels. We covered our predictions. I interviewed Tom, our head of innovation, on his predictions of where the market is going and, for example, Spotify coming up and chucking $250 million in buying Gimlet and more, probably 100 million plus buying Anchor. We talked about monetizing your podcast. We covered about half the monetization strategies. We'll be covering the rest this evening. We talked about your concept. We probably answered about 40 questions, I would say. Different formats of content, and we made you a beautiful offer for the Podcast Media Masterclass, which is now closed. So on to day 2. So if you've just joined in and you missed day 1, that's what you've missed. But hey, you'll still get good value from today. But of course, you've probably only got half of the content. Right, so we're going to cover some case studies. We're trying to, with our case studies, do different types of podcasts in different niches that have different monetization models and then unpicking them. And I think we've got at least another 7 tonight. The second half of monetizing your podcast, your message and your mission to the masses. Find how to leverage all of the media to grow your podcast. So using Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and your email contacts to grow your podcast. We've got some case studies because Jay did that and Shan did that, who I'm going to be interviewing soon. They followed my launch models that I taught them on the Podcast Media Masterclass. Jay got to number 1 in business. Shan got to number 3 in all podcasts in the UK. Epic result. So we're going to teach you how to use your platforms to grow your podcast, your existing platforms, even if you haven't got that many followers. Learn how to market your podcast and launch your podcast and relaunch your podcast and continually market your podcast. We'll cover tonight as well. And then the future of podcasting, the digital media age, the era of the agency, and how you can capitalize on this amazing opportunity to be an influencer, not just a podcaster, a genuine influencer, someone that reaches the masses, someone that builds massive trust and rapport and connection, someone that has celebrities and wealthy individuals following you and becoming your fan. All right, great. So this podcast is called Chapo Trap House. So it's an American political commentary podcast. They have 23,000 patrons or Patreons on the site Patreon, which Tom talked about yesterday. So all of their revenue comes from Patreon. So they don't run any advertising on their podcast, which is fine, by the way. And we're going to cover case studies that do big money. But they get all of their revenue off podcasts, so non-native. I personally do like keeping my podcast pure and not running ads or monetizing it directly. So Patreon is an indirect way of monetizing your podcast. I'm just actually going to share this live stream into one of my other groups. So give me a second. Let's hit the money first. So they make $102,000 US every single month. That is $1.2 million a year from a podcast. Most people are doing 30 minutes a week. Some people are doing less. So, pretty powerful stuff. Okay, so there is more. We have the How Did This Get Made comedy movie podcast. They sell tickets to all their live recordings. They do a live recording. They sell the tickets to the live recording and they splice that live recording into 4 podcast episodes. Like I said, let me just go and share this live stream into one of my communities, sharing a group, stay with me. Yeah, group name, Disruptive done. Okay, so they also sell their back catalogue with only a few free available. If you remember Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, he'd only do a podcast a few times a year. I think it's 5 a year. He'd keep about 4 on the feed only, and then if you wanted to access his entire back catalogue, then you had to go through a paywall and pay money. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this is their business. This is your business. It's your art. You're allowed to charge for it. It's just people like me don't, and I probably should. They sell merch, they have sponsors, they have advertisers, and it's reputed that they make between $50,000 and $70,000 a month. So hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds a year. It is not an unrealistic goal to have for a podcast. Now, I didn't really want this just to be about monetization. I wanted this to be about you getting followers, fans, reach, trickle down revenue. Can we go cut quickly to the trickle down revenue model that I've been sharing quite a few times? Tell me when you're there. Thanks, Felicity. Give it 3 or 4 seconds. In fact, let me go over there. Have a little look at my model. So these are 2 verticals of my companies. We have multiple verticals. These are 2. This is a property vertical. This is a business vertical. No selling on the podcast. All of the organic followers, subscribers come in from social media, from all the platforms like iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify. That'd be the next one. Spotify, organic global reach, recommendations. You know, it goes up in the charts and people see it and subscribe. And then they come through the books, the website, various social media platforms maybe, or directly into one of the events. But at this point, they could have had 50, 100, even 200 hours of virtually free content from me. And then they go through the staircase, which is where they are able to progressively invest in their education courses, mentorships, masterminds, and retreats. And that's how I've decided to monetize my podcast. And that's actually, I mean, that's made me probably roughly 3 million, maybe a bit more. It's hard to track, so it may be a bit more. I'd say approximately 3 million in 3 years. So it's made me roughly $1 million a year without even ever doing an ad on the podcast. I just smashed my knee on the desk there. All right, great. So next part then is how to leverage all media to grow your podcast and vice versa. I don't need to watch myself. So I do plenty of that in the mornings. I don't. I never listen to myself and I never watch myself on video. I can't stand the way I sound. You probably notice I've pretty much lost my voice. That was ever since I broke the public speaking world record 1 year, and then I broke the team public speaking world record the next year. Anyway, so I think a great way to build a great podcast is to test content on one media channel. You might do a live feed on Facebook, for example. You know, I'm pretty prolific on Facebook. I'll probably do 2 posts a day. Let's say that you can do 2 posts a week, 5 posts a week, and you do your lives on Facebook with your Joby and your phone. Job done. Bash out a live, get your Zoom H1, clip it on, do a podcast at the same time. So I might think, I've got some content. I think it'll be good, but I'm not sure. Do a live, see how it goes, give it a day, watch the comments, the engagement, go in and reply to some of the comments, see how that goes, see if it gets better reach. If it's good, then you can re-record it later for a podcast. If it doesn't really get much reach or engagement, you think, oh, well, you know what, the market didn't like it, then I will just crack on and test another piece of content and vice versa. So can I go back to the screen again? Can we get it so that I can just draw on it? So just like a white screen. Yeah. I want to make a point about content that I didn't make yesterday, but I want to come back to that. Thank you very much. That can stay there, actually. I like that. So, oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think I'll go black tonight. I'm feeling sombre. So, you've got your content here. Now, there's content that you like. There's content that your peers or even the industry leaders like. There's content for the critics. There's content for your market. Now, of course, if you are in fame and celebrity and art, content for the critics might be important, but that might just really be for awards and ego. The most important kind of content is what the market wants. But of course, it's got to be something that you also believe in too. So I tend to crowd source at least 1/3 of my content, which is ask the market, what do they want? What problems and pains are they having, you know, in their niche, in the niche that I comment on, which happens to be business and entrepreneurship. So you should never really create content for your peers because there's so few of them and it's not your target market. So just as something to think about when it comes to content. Could we put the visual model back on? It's not urgent. I'm not going to go back to it right now. But so if you come back to me, that would be great. Okay, so once you've tested some content in a Facebook group or on a Facebook Live on your page, and there seems to be a good engagement, you could then publish it as a podcast because you then know you've got more guaranteed reach, listenership, and downloads. Now, what you could do, and I'll go one stage further, and I did cover repurposing your content yesterday actually, is I think you should do this as a matter of course. So you might be doing, let's say this video is for YouTube. I would just always, whenever you're doing content for YouTube or Facebook, I would just always have your Zoom H1N and always record it. Because sometimes you might do a rant or a bit of random content and it might go down really well, or you might be doing some content and you get a kind of a funny or a weird question and you answer it, and that creates a nice little excerpt of content. So I would just always, a matter of course, be recording any content that you do. Now, I just spoke to Kevin Clifton on the phone. He's a client of mine, a mentee. Obviously, he's huge on Strictly Come Dancing. And we're launching his podcast with him. And I know he won't mind me saying, because I had the same issue, but you know, sometimes some of the equipment's not all that easy to use. Even the fairly, apparently simple setup we gave you yesterday, which is the Behringer C1 mics, the splitter box, the XLR cables, the Zoom H4n, even that's a bit of a faff if you're a bit of a technophobe like me. So I told Kev to get 2 Zoom H1s. Well, I told him to get 3 because, you know, he might lose one. Can always just keep them in a kit bag, take them wherever he goes, and then if he's behind the stage with a celebrity, which he probably is every day, you could just clip that on. The guest, you know, whoever that might be, Stacey Dooley, who won the Strictly with him, it might be her, or, you know, I know he can get some really big names, but I won't say them publicly because let's let him get them first. Gives them the mic. What, they have to do this, do they, Harry?
Ideally, but to be honest, in editing you can find any sync point.
Yeah, so they might sync it and then go. And then they'll send it to Harry, and Harry will be able to splice those 2 audio signals into one podcast. All right, great. So once you get a good piece of content, make sure you turn it into multiple pieces of content. So for Harry and I interviewed Martin Fridson. You came down with me. He wrote How to Be a Billionaire. And it was a very good interview. It was very analytical and technical, which I liked. It was different from maybe my style, which I liked. And initially we were going to post it on Disruptive Entrepreneur because that's where we normally post the interviews. But actually what we did was we posted it on the Money podcast first. It's the single highest downloaded podcast on money. It got us loads of new subscribers. We've also published it on YouTube as a YouTube video. And in the future, 3-6 months, we will post it on the Disruptive Entrepreneur podcast. Now that video that we've done, there's plenty of 1-minute cuts that could be taken out of that and put onto Instagram. Excuse me, I've got an itchy eye. And all of a sudden, out of one podcast that we recorded on video, we might have 6 or 7 pieces of content. So I like to have the minimum 1-to-5 ratio, which is when you share a piece of content, you've got at least 5 assets from that one piece of content. Now, therefore, a single podcast could give you a week's worth of social media content. I usually, when I do my podcast, do 30 to 45 minutes. If I live it at the same time, then I've got a LinkedIn video, a YouTube video, I've got multiple Instagram videos, I've got minimum one podcast, maybe more. So the podcast helps me build content for social media, which helps my overall reach. And of course, social media, as I'll teach you soon, helps you grow your podcast. So this reflexive, compounding relationship between the two. So some people, you know, when you ask people to list out social media profiles, and they go Facebook and Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram, they forget to put podcast in the mix. For me, podcast is a social media platform. Now, at the minute, there isn't the two-way social. There's the one-way, i.e., I as the host speak and you listen. But soon enough, there'll be apps and better engines and tech where you can engage socially with your host, I'm sure. They'll probably do Ask Me Anything lives where they might end up being streamed live in the future. Excuse me. So I'm pretty sure it's coming. It's a massive social media platform, even though it might not be one you deem to be social media. You can even take your audio, send it to a transcriber, and what do we pay a transcriber to transcribe a 30-minute episode? What would you roughly reckon?
Not like, probably about €10. We get it very cheap.
€10. So €10 for a 30-minute episode. Does that come back in English, or is it pretty good quality?
Perfect English.
Perfect.
Transcriber we use,
Yeah, so we've got a good one. So for like £8, we have got a full transcription of the 30-minute episode. That can become a blog. We can take little quotes in there, and that can be tweets and Instagram quotes. You know, I might have said, if you don't risk anything, you risk everything. Don't wait to buy property and wait. You have to let go to grow. I might have come up with some nice soundbitey quotes. They can be visuals for Twitter, which they like the little quotes on Twitter. That could be put on an image on Instagram for a rah-rah motivational quote. When all is said and done, more is said than done. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. You know, there could be loads of them. So you've got lots of content repurposing going on. I spoke a bit about that yesterday, covered in more detail today. Okay, now you can do it in reverse. So what you can do is you can plan a blog or an article or a book, and then, are you guys all right at the back? Are we all good on the tech? Yep, all right, good, just checking. So you could, let's look at it like this. You want to write a book. Now, I believe everyone has a book in them, it's just still in them. So if you think about this smart, you could go, right, my concept is self-worth. I'm going to give it a working title, I'm worth more. I'm going to give it a strap line of, what shall we say? Realize your value, unleash your potential. Right, what are the main 30 or 40 chapters do I think are going to be in there? Okay, so it might be self-worth, confidence, etc. And I'll list out 30 or 40 chapters. I can make 30 or 40 podcasts of those 30 or 40 chapters in 30 or 40 weeks, and I've written a book. I can write a blog that can become a podcast. I can do a podcast that can become a blog. I can go on social media and see these great social media posts that get really good engagement. I did one recently which asked, when people say be yourself, is that a bit of a cop-out? Because shouldn't you want to self-actualize and, you know, become someone better, a growth version of yourself? Or should we just settle for who we are and just accept our destiny? And that got quite a lot of engagement and comments and posts. And I thought, that could end up being a podcast, and I could take that concept and take some of the ideas in the comments and create my own content on that. All right, so multiple New York Times bestsellers have done just that. They have taken their podcast episodes and turned them into a book. In fact, they probably didn't even plan to do this. So Tim Ferriss had his podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show, which is a big podcast. And 2-3 years ago, let's say 3 years ago, give or take, he released a book called Tools of Titans. And his Tools of Titans book was simply quotes, or really more interviews and excerpts and advice from his guests. If you listen to his podcast, you can see that he's really just had help and outsourced a lot of that work and collated a lot of his podcasts into a book. I'm not being critical of that. I'm actually being pretty supportive of that, because it's a different format. It would be written in a different way. It would probably have a different order. He might have sectioned it off, compartmentalized it. I'm planning to do something similar with Disruptive Entrepreneur. I've got a kind of a hybrid concept. I'm thinking about a cross between a podcast and an audio book, where I'll take all of my guest interviews, we'll batch them into sections, we will share their wisdom, and then I will share my take on their wisdom. And Tom is writing it with me. So your podcast could become a great book one day. He then went and did it again. So as if one book wasn't enough from his podcast, he then did it again and called it Tribe of Mentors, and pretty much did the same thing again. Richard Reed, he did that with If I Could Tell You Just One Thing, where he went and interviewed a load of famous people, and sometimes he got quotes and sometimes he got deeper interviews, and that became a book. So this one little Zoom H1 can be your total, these two little devices, these three little devices here, your Joby, your phone, and your Zoom H1, because that's your media empire. That is your BBC studio, where you can repurpose content on 10 social media platforms, and one can become 10 or 20, and you can have your books and everything else. It's a really amazing time to be a business owner, a marketer, an influencer, etc. Now, a podcast is a gift that keeps on giving. If you imagine let's say you had a sales conversation 3 years ago with someone, and you didn't convert them into a client. Well, you are getting no ongoing residual benefit from that conversation. Let's even say you had a sales conversation with someone 3 years ago and they became a client. You're still actually not getting any ongoing residual benefit from the conversation because you've had the client and 3 years have passed. But you do a podcast, it goes on iTunes, Stitcher, etc., Spotify. That's an asset for as long as podcasts are podcasts. So the podcast, for me, that has pretty much the most downloads. There's a couple that are there or thereabouts now, but the one that has pretty much the most downloads is episode 1. So that is the oldest episode, yet the biggest asset in my entire episodes of podcasts. Obviously, because it's the first one, because it's the one that's been up there the longest. But most things you do in business and life aren't gifts that keep on giving, that give you recurring benefit. They are things that you did years ago that are over and you've forgotten and are giving you no ongoing residual return. A podcast is. All right, I'm ready for Jay.
Okay.
Great, so our first podcast case study. By the way, if you're watching on the YouTube live stream, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have various new and unique content, past and present and future, coming up on our YouTube channel. We're really upping our YouTube game this year. This is our 5th stream on YouTube. So we only publish our interviews with our guests on our YouTube channel. We do some little excerpts live on Facebook. And we're planning a couple of documentary films that we're doing this year that are going to be exclusively YouTube content. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. The next 4 guests I'm interviewing are the founder of Superdry, worth 41 million tomorrow, the founder of JD Sports, a billionaire, the founder of Betfred, a billionaire, and Joe Malone. So it's good times for the podcast. Jay, how you doing?
Good.
You ready?
Ready.
Give you a big round of applause. The 1,000 people in the auditorium.
Awesome.
We
I sit where we sit anyway.
should get a little audio thing that does a big round of applause.
Yeah.
We should play it because when people walk on, it's a bit like,
Hi from Wales.
hi. Yeah, exactly.
Cheers, the high. Should we get on
Yeah, yeah. Let's go on this one. Get nice and cozy.
Oh, good.
Camera 1, we're on.
Good. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. So first off, Jay, I want to say thanks a lot for coming, all the way from Derby.
Yeah.
It's not that far, is it?
No, it's only
Hour?
an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. But regardless of how far you've travelled, I'm really grateful
Yeah.
that you've come to be in the
Appreciate it.
studio.
That's good.
So let's talk about your podcast.
Yeah.
So you did the Podcast Media Masterclass. This was how long ago?
It's coming up to a year.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think it's one of the first ones you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember something very, very clearly on that course at the end. Yeah.
Which was, I can share with you.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Well, obviously I'm quite competitive anyway.
Yeah.
In business, but I think I said to Rob, I'm going to be your number one podcaster.
Yeah.
I'm going to reach number one.
Yeah.
And I'm going to crack on with it.
Yeah.
And straight away from then, I followed the steps, and got the results, and there they are.
Yeah, I mean, being above Tim Ferriss is a pretty big thing.
Yeah, exactly. It was an amazing thing, and
he makes between $2 and $4 million a year on his podcast.
Yeah. So to get there, and I think one of the biggest things was business. Now, although it's a well-known niche, it's very competitive. I think we had the conversation when I said, about content, and one of the things that stuck with me was when you said to me, look, it's your take on situations. Because in business, nothing's really new, is it? So, and that kind of encouraged me to do that. And when I did that, it kind of flowed.
Yeah.
Well,
as soon as you came up with the concept, I really liked it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because on the podcast course, I go around everyone's concept and we do that one-to-one. And as soon as Jay said it, I liked it because I thought, what business person doesn't want a business mentor?
Yeah.
It positions you as a mentor, even though it's called the Business Mentor Podcast.
Yeah.
It's quite clever the way it positions you as a business mentor, and then you can interview your business mentors.
Yeah.
You could even in the future interview your students who've done really well.
Yeah.
You've interviewed Luca, haven't you?
Yeah,
as one of your
Luca.
mentees.
We've had Ant Knight. We've had Najinda. We've had quite a few.
So some of the people you mentor.
Yeah, that I mentored. And look, some people want to share their story, and that's just amazing. And the best thing now, being a year on, is when you go back and listen to them.
Yeah.
And me and Luca did an episode on a 30-day business challenge, and you listen back now.
Yeah.
And that content is more amazing now than it was when I did it.
Yeah.
So I really, I think that's the amazing thing about podcasting.
Yeah.
It's legacy.
Yeah.
It's there for life.
So one thing that happened with Jay, I've known Jay for a while now, and he gets stuff done, and he gets it done well, and there's no fuss, and there's no excuses. He just gets it done. And I was on the Podcast Media Masterclass, and I think this was the first one.
Yeah,
I think you were the first person that launched a podcast.
Yep, I was, yeah.
Which you wanted to be.
Yeah, I wanted to be.
So you got out there quick.
Yep.
You did the podcast course, you cracked on, you got it done.
Yeah.
But you walked up to me at lunch in that session and you said, Rob, I came here and I wasn't going to buy anything.
Yeah.
I was convinced, I told myself I wasn't going to.
Yeah.
But you still signed up for the
definitely.
agency package.
I'm a salesperson.
Yeah.
And no salesperson wants to be sold to.
Yeah.
In that kind of sense. But yeah, everything just ticked all the boxes.
Yeah.
I thought I had it all figured out. Now, obviously, I had all my plans to do what I was going to do with the podcast. But when we were on the class and everything you talked about, it ticked every single box. So even though I was adamant, it just made total sense.
And why did you decide to use the agency? What's the benefit of it to you?
Time, efficiency. And bearing in mind, I was one of the probably first ones that used it. So it wasn't really proven, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I can honestly say that it's amazing.
Yeah.
I just focused on, I'm making revenues from the podcast, but I give the podcast to the team. They do everything, really professional, best service, the team here. I'm not saying that anyone, you can ask anyone.
Yeah.
And I'm in recruitment, so I worked with a lot of people, but I must say they just get on with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm late in my podcast, but they'll just work and do the extra bit. Never missed an episode.
Which is great.
And
how many episodes have you done now?
We're on about 43 it's going to be. Just on Mark Homer now, which was an amazing episode.
Great.
We just carried on flowing, but it was a really good episode. So
Mark's good when you get him relaxed.
Yeah, Mark's amazing. I thought we were going to do 30 minutes. We did like 1 hour 10.
Wow.
And he dropped some real good content,
Yeah.
And look, by the way, I'm just getting good at it, you
Yeah.
know. And I'm not saying that I'm an amazing podcast interviewer, but the more you do, the better you get.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it now. I don't even script it as much. I didn't bring any notes.
No.
And I just got on with it because I'm genuinely interested in my guests.
Yeah.
I want to know the story.
Because you got Patrick Bet-David, didn't you? He's a huge American guy.
That was amazing. Patrick Bet-David was probably one of the biggest. Well, he has got one of the biggest YouTube channels, Valuetainment, 1.4 million. He's growing, and to get him on to my podcast, a business podcast, was amazing.
Yeah.
And I've had Neville Wright.
Yeah.
I've had
worth 100 million.
I've had a guy called Rob Moore on it. You know? But you know, we've had some real good guests, and we mixed it with not so well-known guests.
You were really good on your interview. You came up with some different questions, and I'm not just saying that as well, but you were really relaxed.
Yeah.
I think you asked me about Liverpool at one point.
Liverpool, Kim Kardashian, Beyonce. We had a bit of fun. And by the way, you can have fun.
Yeah.
You can have fun. The best thing about podcasting is when you get into it, it's not as stressful as you think. You know, it's having conversation.
Yeah.
And what a great conversation we'd like to come on my podcast.
Yeah.
You know, how else can you get, I'd say Patrick Bavies put in £1 billion worth of sales, over $100 million business.
Yeah.
How can you get him into a conversation?
Yeah.
You know, podcast is a great way of opening that door. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Have you generated any revenue? Have you got any leads or any business from it?
Oh, massive. So when we launched the podcast, I created a website. I just mirrored your website, and we put like a call to action, free mentoring call. And I thought no one's going to go for it. And since then, you know, we inundated around the world. People just clicking a free call. So I had to stop that.
Yeah.
And then mentoring clients. I think within the first 6 months, there was about 100K worth of mentoring clients.
Wow.
So I didn't obviously use all of them, but the ones I wanted to work with, I worked with, because obviously mentoring is time thing. And then also we did some mentoring events here, which again generated quite a lot of money. So really, I could probably...
We ended up working together.
We did, we did mentoring days together.
Yeah.
And that was demand, wasn't it? It was many demand. And that was some great sessions, and people, you know, really dig deep into mentoring. And I really enjoyed that. But I would say overall, first year, if I put... And by the way, I've done no selling.
Yeah.
I've literally, if you go through all my podcasts, I may start doing, but I've never put I'm a mentor.
Yeah.
And people just approach me. And that's the best way to give you content. And I would say probably 200K on the table.
Wow. Pretty good.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
For something I love doing.
Yeah.
And that's going to grow and grow and grow. And I was at a talk yesterday. I think people all know about podcasting, but some of them don't, and they've just connected with me, and it just gives you that bit of authority, you know. You know, when you come to the course, we'll brainstorm some ideas, and you'll come up with a concept which fits you. You know, that fits me, like you said, because one, I've done mentor of the Prince's Trust. It fitted nicely into what I was doing, and you know, having that brainstorming session allows you to do that.
You just got to... Because there are so many business podcasts, your concept is just quite unique.
Yeah.
But not too unique that it's weird.
Yeah. And it was good to have, you know, bounce ideas from you. Because I think I must have quite a few names. I think it was some other names I had. And then I think I emailed you and you said, right, this is the one.
Yeah.
I said, what do you think? And you said, get the domain, got the domain. And yeah, it's been a great journey. You know, I can't fault anything. I don't think I've had any problems. I think the only problems I would have had, and I'll be honest with you, is probably if I tried to edit it myself. Yeah. I think that would have really probably knocked my momentum, because my main focus now is to get the content and get the guest, and the revenue comes in. If it was trying to, you know, edit it, I'm not very good at editing. Yeah. If I was good, then maybe that would be easier. But yeah, genuinely it's good. And it's good for me to say that I've got an editing team. You know, I've got Tom, I've got Harry, you know, and Aaron and Felicity. They're part of the team. Yeah. So we're part of a whole community. I might be mentioning the mastermind, how many people we got on there, and the people that...
We had Jake Wood come down to the last one from EastEnders. And
Jake Wood.
Yeah, we do that once a quarter. That's part of a couple of the levels on the agency.
Yeah, and that's... And the people in there, you know, some big people like, you know, property entrepreneurs, you know, people myself, we're on there and we're all talking, we're part of a group. So you can always put get help on that group as well. Yeah.
Great. So give one final shout out to your podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is the Business Mentor Podcast. It's on iTunes. We've got 202 5-star reviews. Got a group as well on Facebook. But yeah, check out the episodes, some great content there. And hopefully I look forward to seeing some of you at the mastermind.
Great.
Good.
All right, Jay,
thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jay.
Cheers. Cheers, Rob.
He's going under the camera. Yeah, thanks, Jay. All right then, so yesterday we covered ways to monetize your podcast. We have more ways to monetize your podcast. Let's see where we're at. So yes, you could take a talk that you've done and you could put it on a membership site. You could take a podcast you've done and have it behind a paywall. So Dan Carlin with Hardcore History keeps 3 or 4 in his feed, and then you have to pay to get access to the rest of the content. You could have 2 levels of content on your podcast. You could have the freemium model where you have free content, and then they pay for premium or exclusive content. That's how Patreon works, in that you can give exclusive content to patrons on Patreon, so that you could link your podcast to it by getting them to go to Patreon, become a patron, make a donation, and then they get unique content through Patreon, and you can do various different levels on Patreon. So there's quite a lot of ways you can take content and monetize it by repackaging it. So we talked about Patreon a bit yesterday. I suppose it's essentially a cross between crowdfunding and donations, but it's a very much growing business model in the UK. Jordan Peterson, as we heard yesterday, has left Patreon and is planning maybe to set up his own platform. I think there will be other platforms that will copy what Patreon are doing, which is where you can get people to crowdfund and donate towards you creating your art. Now, if we're in the throes of setting up my Patreon account. Now, for me, it's not really about the money, but I want to be on Patreon because I want to be on all media. So could we go to the... Yeah, let's go to the screen. If you could just put up a white page. I'm going to try and do this off the top of my head. So let's see if this works. Yeah, I can just rub that off, can't I? Okay, so let's say you have either Patreon or your own or another version of Patreon. So you could have level 1, which could be $9.99, and they have on level 1, you might have a 1 hour episode that is unique, and then you might have a signed book. So let's say my signed book money, something like that. And then you might have level 2, which might be, let's call it 29, and you might have level 1, plus you might have 1 by 15 minute one-to-one call with me or with the podcaster. Then you could have, that could even be more. You could have level 3, which could be 59, which is levels 1 and 2, plus all signed books, because I've got lots. Plus you could have a monthly mastermind, so a monthly meetup. How do you move them? Look at that. Look at that. Then you could have level 4 and you go, bosh, this is 299. So you go the big level. So you might go levels 1 to 3 plus 2 hour 1-to-1 plus, what else could you throw? What else could you throw in for 300 quid? A go on the miss? No.
Depends, mate. Depends how desperate.
Let me think. On my feet. And interview me as a guest on your show. I'm so OCD, it doesn't matter, does it? Just write the W. There you go. Interview me as a guest on your podcast. You could come up with some others. There you go. So now on your Patreon or crowdfunding platform, you have a $9.99, a $29, a $59, and a $299 level. Now, you'll get maybe 5% or 10% that have that. You might have 40 or 50% that have that, and fairly equally between those two. So there you go. If you had 100 members, 1,000 members, 10,000 members, obviously you can work out the serious revenue. And this is per month, by the way. I'll just check that with Tom, actually. Tom, if you're watching, can you pop in? Tom, on Patreon, is it per month? Is it monthly, or is it one-off?
You can do both monthly and one-off payments for patrons.
And what's most common?
Most common is for people to do monthly recurring payments. Anywhere from $5 to $20 are the kind of most common amounts.
Okay. What's the highest level Patreon you've ever seen? Because I've just tried to come up with some examples here. What's the highest level you've ever seen?
There's a podcast I follow, and they have a Patreon, and they have 4 really normal tiers. It's like £5, £10, £20, £30. And then just for fun, they have a tier that's £500. And there's nothing extra on that tier other than thanks, we love you. And they have 4 people supporting them on that tier that are just super fans. But of course, if they didn't have that tier,
I've
those
given away
fans...
levels 1 to 3 and a 2-hour one-to-one with me and an interview with
There you
me.
go.
Pull my pants down.
But what's great about it is there's no cost in them having that tier, and without it, there'd be no other way for those super fans to pay them that money.
Yeah, there you go. I'm up in my super level. All right, great. Thanks, Tom.
No worries, I'll hang about in the studio.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll go back to the desk. Okay, you can cross-sell as an affiliate. So later on, we have Pat Flynn's podcast, which is coming up. We're going to do a little bit of a case study on him. So you could, on your podcast, offer products and services that you could get 10, 20, or even more % on the revenue for. So Pat Flynn does this. I've set up this kind of podcast, almost like a collective, if you like, a podcast movement. We want to be kind of like the biggest UK podcast movement. We have nearly 90 to 100 podcast clients in our agency. And as Jay referred to there, we run a quarterly mastermind on 2 of the levels, I believe, where we all get together every quarter. There's usually 70 of us over in the training suite. And I said to everyone, if they want to generate some revenue on their podcasts, then they can sell my products and services on their podcasts as an affiliate to me. We'll give them a unique tracking link so that's tracked. And that's tracked through 2 years through the customer journey. So they could affiliate with my products. I'm happy to pay them some money and hopefully get them some recurring revenue. So it's another model of income that you could do. So you're ultimately building up potential multiple streams of income. Like Joe Rogan, I said this yesterday, he advertises companies and gets a revenue share for that. He advertises companies that he has a share interest in, so he's kind of double dipping there. He fills his comedy gigs, so he's triple dipping, and then he gets paid serious money by the UFC to promote and commentate on the UFC. So yesterday I said he was triple dipping. He's actually quadruple dipping. He's got 4 streams of income for his podcast. If Tim Ferriss makes 2 to 4 million a year, he must be doing 10 million a year plus. He must be. I've done a lot of research on this, and the figures are wildly variable. Some people say he makes like 60, 70, 80 grand a month. Other people says he makes like 50 million a year. Tom, you got something?
Yeah, so actually Tim Ferriss does have an actual blog which he wrote about how he makes his money on his podcast. And you can search it, and it's one of the most transparent pieces online that you'll find of someone of that level breaking down how he makes all his money.
Yeah.
And it's called something like, how I run a $6 million a year 6 million subscriber podcast, and he goes through what he charges his advertisers, how the ad deals work, and it's a great read to understand how it works on that high level.
Yeah.
And that blog is several years old now, so you can kind of extrapolate from there how far he's gone.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. So yeah, you can build up multiple streams of income through your podcast. Next then, so this is the way the world has changed. So give it a year ago, and I was saying that companies like Gimlet Media might come up and buy your podcast off you. And then Spotify came and bought Gimlet Media. So you know in Star Wars, where the big, what's that ship called? And it comes over and it gobbles up the... So this is like Spotify, this is Gimlet, and this is you. So for me, a year ago, I thought this is a prediction, but is it really a viable thing? And now Spotify have paid 250 million for Gimlet, and they paid, what, 100 odd million for Anchor. And users have value. Freakonomics was bought by Stitcher. What do we reckon? It was about $4 million, do we reckon?
Oh, easily, yeah.
Yeah.
They have a huge following, so they'll be buying, the prestige of running the Freakonomics podcast, and the cool podcast that is, and then having all of their customers and all of their listeners every single week as well.
To advertise, and now it says sponsored by or in association with Stitcher, as it would. So it may be quite a lot more than 4 million. I don't know for sure, but I mean, if Spotify paid 250 million for Gimlet Media, it's got to be plausible that it's a good, maybe even 10 million for Freakonomics.
Oh, 100%, yeah. I can totally see that.
Yeah.
They've got the book back end and everything.
Yeah.
Got huge scope with their brand.
Yeah, great. So Freakonomics is just a show. Yeah. Okay, Gimlet Media are a load of shows, but Freakonomics is one show. That's it. So look, you may not desire to sell your podcast. I certainly wouldn't desire to sell mine, but I know we get offered a lot to run ads on it, and if someone offers me to buy it one day, I'm just going to put that as a little feather in my cap. We've been offered quite a lot of times to sell our lettings agency, and we don't do it, but it's nice to know that you could come out with a capital value and have a capital asset. Like with property, you have the capital asset and you have the income streams. Now, I used to just think with podcasting, it was the ad revenue income streams, but now there's 11 or 12 or 14 income streams, but there's also now the capital value. And I suppose if I sold my podcast, I would be in control of the contract, i.e. I'm not going to do the deal unless I've got a contract which I'm happy with, so I wouldn't let them tie me in knots about what I could say and what I couldn't say. And all they're going to do is say Disruptive Entrepreneur sponsored by Gimlet Media or, NPR or whoever. So, who knows? I don't know why I said that with such a squeak. Who knows? And yeah, I reckon we sort of discover, don't we, a new monetization model every 3 to 6 months, would you say?
Nearly every time we talk about it, we discover something new, which is a way, like what you'll have soon as well, you'll have ways to make money without ever hosting a podcast, because you'll have people who are like professional podcast guests, and all they are is a really interesting guest that goes on another podcast, like TV pundits. You'll have people who are hosts of podcasts and you're hired to be a host. Yeah. There's a network called Wondery that host loads of big podcasts, and all of their hosts for their podcasts are news producers and news TV people who you just get hired by them to come in. And so eventually you'll have people who are making money off podcasting without even running their own podcast. Yeah.
Who's the lady, the American lady? She's very famous. She's quite frumpy. And she got paid £1 million or $1 million to do a podcast. Oh, wow. I wish I could remember her name. I was really hoping you'd remember her name, because I just said the word frumpy, which I've not said for many years, and I just said it live. But she's very famous. Is it Amy Schumer?
Oh, Amy Schumer. Yeah, could well be Amy Schumer. The comedian. She's a comedian.
Yeah, and just basically, there's $1 million. Let's do a podcast. Mm-hmm. So people are, like there's an artist will get commissioned to do work, like installations which they couldn't afford. Well, people are getting paid and funded to do podcasts. So that's another business model around it. There are a lot of monetization models. All right, great. Some other massive side benefits of being a podcast host. And that is your ability to repurpose content and have multiple streams of income and multiple assets of content, because your podcast is not just one piece of content. The next thing, and this is, I can't underestimate this enough. Is that the right word? I can't underestimate this enough. I can't overstate this enough. The best thing I get to do with my podcast is meet cool people. I'm meeting 2 billionaires, 1 half billionaire, and Joe Malone for the next 4 interviews that we're doing. Who would think that that's even a job? Like, it's not like I have to do that. It's like I get to do that. And I get benefit. I have the best seat in the house to learn. I've had some really good connections and friendships with many celebrities now. I've become very good friends with quite a few of them, which of course opens huge doors and elevates my brand and position. People like Jake Wood and Aston Marigold and Macy Williams, who I went out for dinner with a few weeks ago with her and a couple of members of her team who are also awesome. She's Arya Stark in Game of Thrones. Obviously Kevin Clifton, who's only one of 2 guests who's been on my podcast twice. Chatted to him on the phone for half an hour just before we started this podcast. Like, that is the coolest thing to do in the world. And I get paid about £1 million a year without even trying to make £1 million a year to go and do that. What better job in the world? And I just feel very grateful and lucky to be able to do that. And when we went down to interview Daley Thompson, he actually challenged me to do a workout, which I turned down. And then we went and had sushi for about 3 hours. Just sat there having sushi, and he was telling me how he got offered, I think, 300 grand to do I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here, and he turned it down. And we were just like getting to know each other. He was just the coolest, down-to-earth guy. And I'm just like, I'm coming back on the train and thinking, I got to do that. That was crazy. All right, how are we doing for time? Been going about an hour? Great. Okay, people, there's a frictionless exchange where people will buy all of your trickle-down products and services. Any books you release, any merch you release. I mean, I've not released any merch, but you will see I've printed a few T-shirts for myself. Just saying, this actually should go Boss T-shirt that I just printed over. We're going to get some water bottles done. And actually, you know, I've probably had 200 people who said, oh, Rob, I'd like to buy a T-shirt, or I'd like to buy a water bottle or whatever. That's not why I'm doing it. But we're just playing around with this stuff, and as we build a bigger brand, if there's demand for merch, we'll create merch. There's all sorts of related products. People sell like all sorts of merch on Patreon, don't they?
Yeah, and one of the best things about podcasts that sell merch is online now. There's loads of like print on demand services and produce on demand. So you don't even have to have stock for these things, you know. So you'll see loads of podcasts that sell, you know, mugs with their logo on and slogans and stuff, and they don't even have to pay up front for any stock. They just print it when the order comes in. So it's the easiest money you can make because you don't even have any upfront risk or cost.
Yeah, you can make your own planners, and you know, there's like the sort of the diaries and the workbooks. They sell really well. My lovely friend Shah Wasman, she's just done these sort of planners, and like, you know, like for me, that's not why I do it. And I'll do it if there's big demand and we've got time and it doesn't overtake another income stream. But, you know, I'll also have a business that will probably do 20 million quid this year, and I'm also converting about 135,000 square foot worth of property. So I've got enough to do. But, you know, you may have podcast as your main thing. For me, podcast is like my 9th thing, behind books and audio books and a property business and a property training company and a letting agency and buying properties and all sorts of things. But it's slowly but surely becoming the biggest, most serious thing. Like for probably 8 years running Progressive Property, if I was like in London or if I was flying in an airport somewhere, I might get recognised twice a year, like in the latter days, like, you're Rob from Progressive. I get recognised 3 to 4 times every time I leave the house now. I get recognised in airports, I get recognised. Even on aeroplanes, people stop me. People stop me in London. When I'm doing podcasts, people stop me and interrupt me there, stop me at the train station, people in the train, all the time. Now, the funny thing is, you can't see my face on a podcast, but none of them ever say to me, oh, you're Rob who spent 13 years grafting to build Progressive Property. They say, oh, you're Rob, you're the podcaster. I listen to your podcast, The Disruptive Entrepreneur. So it's a very surreal experience and, of course, a great experience. Podcasts will give you massive credibility, even if you have none. Like, podcasting is a big thing. And if you're a podcaster and a well-known one, that is a very credible business. And if you think about it, 5 or 10 years ago, it was probably a bit of a joke. What do you do? Oh, I'm a podcaster. Well, 10 years ago, you're like, sorry, mate, never mind. What do you do for food? You know, it was different back then. But now you're a podcaster and you're a celebrity and you're a brand. And there's people who were otherwise not well known who've become big celebrities because of their podcast. Wasn't there a YouTuber on Strictly recently? I think there was. And for me, that's like a game changer. When you get social media stars that are on reality TV shows. Maybe I'll be the first podcaster on Strictly. Kev, are you watching? I'm never doing that. And I'm not big enough. It's the softest sale ever. You don't have to pitch really hard. It's the softest sale ever. You have trickle-down revenue from your podcast, and you're in right at the start of the future of the biggest media. You'll get interviewed yourself. So I tend to turn down more podcasts than I do. I probably need to do more. At the moment, my diary is absolutely racked out. I'd say now probably 3 or 4 times a week I get asked to go on podcasts. That's not including the people in our podcast agency where I agree to them to go on their podcast as well. If I cleared my diary, I could probably do a podcast a day. And it's quite a surreal thing when people interview you, because obviously you have this level of credibility where normally you were interviewing great guests and now people are perceiving you as a great guest to interview. That's a cool thing too. All right, so could we line up a video? Just play a quick video. 2 minutes. All right, I'll tell you what, chuck me any questions. Yeah, ping me some, and turn the aircon off. I just need a couple of minutes. So if you've got any questions, please post them in the thread below on either of the Facebook feeds or in the comments thread on the YouTube channel. My team will go and get some and bring them in. We're going to play you a little video in a moment, and because I thought it'd be a nice change up. And then also next section's going to be, I'm pointing at my prompt slide, how to market your podcast and get #1 status. Now, Jay has done great with his podcast, getting to #1. Catherine Turner, who I interviewed yesterday, getting to #1. John Clark getting to #10. Shan, who's going to be here later, getting to #3 in all podcasts in the UK. And of course, therefore, #1 in all of his subcategories. But they've not done it by accident. They've followed a business model, a launch model that I have taught them, and I'm going to start teaching you some of that in about 2 minutes' time. Is it on, or are you telling me it's ready? It's ready. Okay, well, I'll do these 3 questions, and then we'll go into the video. How long should I run my podcast before launching my Patreon? Tom? I reckon you'd go straight away.
100%. I would, if you're going to plan on doing Patreon, do it from your very first episode. Yeah. It's the fastest way to start getting some money from your podcast. No one's going to begrudge you for asking it from absolutely episode 1. Yeah,
it's probably harder when you're a long way in, because you're maybe perceived as more successful. You know, please donate to Rob Moore's multi-millionaire fund. You know, no.
Patreon is honestly the easiest thing, because it's like, do you like what I'm doing? Would you like me to do more of it? I would need some money to do that, thank you. It's so easy.
Great, so straight away. Will your agency help me improve my podcast content? 100% yes. I've got 18 different content models. We're always working out great questions for guests. We're always working out what kind of content is, you know, makes it more listenable. We do funky things on the 50th, the 100th, the 150th, the 200th episodes. We're always looking to disrupt our content. We've done a couple of experimental episodes. We've done live episodes. So yeah, the great thing about being in our agency is everything we learned doing my podcast, we pass down to you. How is the podcast industry going to change in the next 5 years? This was made for you, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to do that whilst you go and have a break instead of a video?
You go and do that.
How long do you want?
Give me 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay.
Yeah. So Tom's going to cover, for those of you that weren't here yesterday, Tom is our head of innovation. He was with me at the start, since the start of the podcast, when we had a tin pot mic, you know, in a tiny little room going, whoa. Yeah.
Cool, so hello everyone. If you didn't meet me yesterday, as Rob said, I'm the head of innovation for Progressive Group. I helped him start the podcast just over 3 years ago. So I'll just answer this question. We covered it in more in depth yesterday. So over the next 5 years in podcasting, what we're going to see is the maturation of the industry. This is a trend you'll be able to look at and model industries like what's happened with video industries like YouTube and social media industries, looking at Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. You're going to see them go from lots of hobbyist podcasts, lots of people doing it as a passion, but not have any kind of idea that they're going to make any money from it. It's going to grow. You're going to see big advertisers come in. Yesterday we talked that there's been a lot of case studies from marketing and ad agencies where they've started to realize that actually the relationship that podcasters have with their audience is like incredibly powerful in selling any kind of product or service, and the conversions that advertisers are now getting from selling their products through podcasts and using what is like termed like brand integrations is really, really powerful. So a brand integration is, for example, whereas instead of me saying, oh, okay, now I'm going to do a 1-minute advert about a mattress shop, I instead go, right, let me tell you guys about this mattress I've been using for the last 30 days. And I say, oh, I had a really good sleep on it. My partner slept on it really well as well. And knowing that the podcaster has experienced it, you experience it with them, that works really powerful. And you're going to see all of those kind of advertisers now enter the industry. Rob's got some stats coming up later about how much money is being poured in. Every year is a record year for podcasts in regards to growth and advertising. It's one of the kind of last kind of wild wests of advertising where there's few rules, it's not flooded with people, it's not saturated with different marketers, and everyone's still discovering the best ways to make money from it and get their products across. So that's one of the biggest things you're going to see is this kind of evolving and maturing ad industry. You're going to see more big people bring on their podcasts, celebrities, noteworthy people. You're going to see the formats change. So something that happened just before the end of last year was we had our first reality podcast, and that is basically a reality TV show, but as a podcast. And it was, I believe it was someone who had been on The Only Way is Essex, and she got commissioned, as we were just talking about, and she got paid by a network to produce a reality podcast about her and her family life. And it's exactly the same as you might see with The Only Way is Essex or Made in Chelsea, but in podcast format. And that's smashed a lot of records in its niche for the kind of podcast it's listening to, the amount of people that are listening to it. And again, now you're starting to see that kind of thing happen as well. We're going to move away from, having the podcast mostly being, one person talking to you or two people talking to each other about something. And you're going to see this variance of formats. You're going to see some experimentation with what a podcast is, how it works. Leading on from that, I talked about we'll stop seeing the kind of really traditional format of 25-minute long once a week podcasts, and we'll see a rise in varying formats. So like 1-minute daily podcasts for platforms like Alexa. And one of the biggest things we're going to have is just general massive growth. So again, I'm reiterating a bit what I said yesterday, but we had, the US is by far the most mature podcast market, and they still only have a third of people listening to podcasts. We are the next most mature, and we are probably at about 15% of our market. So the rest of the world has got to catch up to that. So there's like vast opportunity for growth absolutely everywhere. That's plenty. Thank you.
Perfect timing, Tom. Cool. Thank you very much for holding the fort. All right, so now let's move on to how to market your podcast to #1 status. Don't forget, is the camera still pointing over there where Tom was sat? Looks like it is. Camera 1. Yeah. Hi, I'm over here. All right, so how to market your podcast. I said this yesterday, there's no point having a podcast that you do in a dark room and only your mum listens to it because you're not getting your content out to the world and you're not reaching your target audience and you're not making a difference. So marketing is very important. So a few elements that we have iterated over the years to have successful launches and shares and boosts and regular hits of getting your podcast subscriptions and downloads. So the first thing is competitions and giveaways. So we usually, when we launch a podcast, we'll add some kind of bonus with it to subscribe to it. Now, the thing with podcasting is there's still a lot of people who don't know how to subscribe to a podcast. And so they've probably always thought that they should or they'd like to, but then it's a bit of a faff and then they don't. And of course, that's getting... podcasts are getting more popular now, and therefore more and more people are figuring it out. If you incentivize them to figure it out by giving them a gift, then they're obviously going to the extent to which their gift is valuable to them is the effort that they will take to go and work out how to subscribe to the podcast. So a recent one I gave is I collated all my marketing reports and key performance indicators for my company, for a 15, 20 million pound a year business. That broke down into about 120 different blah. I've been doing back-to-back days, I'm a bit blah. So 120 different KPIs. I collated it into a document and I said, hey, look, if you subscribe to my podcast, I'll give you a copy of this document. And that took us back up to number 2 in the charts behind, I think, Tim Ferriss, and we dropped a little bit, so that got a good hit. I went then a couple of days later to my existing podcast and said, if you review my podcast, then I'll give you a copy of that same document, and we got 450 new reviews. Now that's only people who listen to the podcast, of course. I wouldn't, no one's going to review the podcast if they hadn't listened to it, and I would definitely not expect that of them. But that report worked really well to encourage people who listen to give reviews and to encourage people who don't yet listen to, thank you, Harry, to subscribe. If that bonus is kind of throwaway or not very valuable, they're less likely to do it. If it's really valuable, they'll do it. The next thing is, once someone has maybe subscribed to their podcast and got a gift from you, you could then in a week or two give them another gift to share the podcast. So I also have a document that I created, which is my 5-step elegant social media sales system. So I've worked out a way to sell best on social media, and selling directly on social media doesn't really work anywhere near as well. There's a 5-step automated process of giving information about the offer, then connecting through a private message or a tag in a thread, then me replying to them, well actually it's my outsourcer, with a link to a pre-recorded video that qualifies them. Then underneath the pre-recorded video, they then register their interest by hitting a button and then sharing their details. Then those details go to a team member of mine, and then my team member of mine then calls them up and then probably uses 2 calls to then book them on to the product or service that is used for that system. So I detailed that out, and I put about 12 of my best performing social media posts that have got 500,000 views, 700,000 views, 1 million views, 1,800 comments. And I put that all into a document. And so I offered people, if they shared my podcast on their social media, I'll give them a free copy of this document, which in the future I'm very likely to sell because obviously it has saleable value. So for the same individual, they could share, they could either subscribe to my podcast or review my podcast or share my podcast. You could actually do all 3 over like a 6-week period, and you've just had 3 hits at bumping your subscriptions, your downloads, and therefore your rankings for your podcast. It works an absolute treat. Okay, we've covered that. Thank you very much. Cheers. Where'd you get the water from? Not the tap.
Not from the tap, from a filter.
Not that I'm a water snob or anything.
Only the finest for you, Rob.
Okay, now obviously once you get your rankings up, you'll want to take a screenshot of that because, you might be up in the top in the charts for weeks, but you might be top in the chart for hours or days. You don't know. So get yourself up there, take that screenshot, you've got that asset forever. Now you can use that screenshot when you connect with potential guests, which obviously shows good social proof that your podcast has good rankings and reach, and that will definitely help you get more good heavyweight guests. It's really important, and you want to make a note of this, whenever you launch a podcast, i.e. an episode, you want to make sure every week when you launch the episode, you share it on your page, you share it on your profile, you do a little visual of it on Instagram. Are we at that point yet? We're supposed to be doing Instagram visuals, aren't we, for all of our podcast episodes?
We are doing that.
Yeah, okay, great. We are doing that. That's good. You could make little audio clips that look like visual audio clips in the Facebook feed. When you see a little video, but it's just got the graphic equalizer. You make little audio clips, and every time an episode goes out, you want to make sure you advertise. And of course, it's not salesy and spammy because a podcast is free content everywhere. Now, I don't do this enough. I probably only post in my Disruptive Entrepreneur group I don't really post anywhere else about my new episodes. Occasionally some other places if they're big guests, and I probably only do it every other episode. So I actually need to do this more myself. Covered all the contests already. No. So you could actually run a proper contest. So you could say, we did a contest, didn't we, where we gave away podcast equipment, we gave away some training in the studio, and some one-to-one time with the team, and Simon Lown won that, and he got basically £5,000 worth of equipment, and I think we got 750, was it 750 or 7,500? Probably 7,500, new subscribers to our podcast when we did this competition, because there was a big prize. But when you do a competition for a big prize, obviously you've got to make sure and work out, well, if I give like £5,000 worth of prizes, but I only get 3 subscribers, that's not going to work for me. Although the only hard cost to us was the equipment, and then the rest was just time. And so you've got to work out, do you think you're going to get enough subscribers to more than enough pay for the equipment or the giveaways, the prizes? And what I'll normally do, I reckon it's easily worth £1 a subscriber. I'd probably argue it's probably worth £2 or £3 a subscriber. So if you think you get 100 subscribers, it's well worth 100 to 200 quid in prizes. And anybody could get 100 subscribers, I'm pretty sure of that, if the prize is good. So that's something else that you can do. We should probably do that a bit more, shouldn't we? We do it from time to time. By the way, when you launch the podcast, don't do a competition and give away at the same time, because it kind of muddies the message. When you launch a podcast, hey, look, this is the podcast, it's brand new, it's coming in a few days, we've got this sexy bonus on launch day, which helps the rankings, and sort of time delay it. When I go through my entire launch process with you on the Podcast Media Masterclass, I'll talk you through the pre-launch, the launch, the post-launch, the relaunch, and then the ongoing marketing. You spread them all out so you get lots more subscribers and lots more pushes up the rankings and the charts. Okay, you always want a deadline when you give bonuses away. Otherwise, people can just think, oh, well, I'll do it tomorrow because it'll be around. Scarcity and urgency do work. If you don't have them, then you won't get the subscription. Because if you think about it, if someone's going to subscribe, they're going to subscribe anyway. So you're kind of okay with those people. But it's the people like, I'm not sure about the concept, or I don't really know how to figure out how do you do this podcast thing. So go on then, tell me. I'll go and find a mate. Oh, Harry, Rob keeps going on about this podcast thing, but I really want this document he's doing. Where's this podcast app then? There it is. Blimey, it was in my phone. That was pretty easy. All right, so how do you do it? What do you do? Okay, you go to search. You type in Disruptive Entrepreneur. If I type in DIS, the Disruptive Entrepreneur comes up third. That's great. Oh, all right, yeah, got it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, got it. 833 ratings. That'll do. Hit subscribe. That was easy, yeah. And then you just play your episode. And kind of, we've all gone through that. When we didn't know how to subscribe to a podcast and we didn't realize how easy it was. So if you've got a great gift and a bonus and a deadline, because they've got to do this by the end of the day, then that's going to just make them do it then, and you're going to get your subscriber, otherwise you wouldn't have. Make sure you leverage all free social media. Post about your podcast on Instagram, post about your podcast on LinkedIn, post about your podcast on YouTube, post about your podcast on Instagram, post about your podcast on Patreon, post about your podcast on Twitter. Post about your podcast on Pinterest. Post about your podcast on Snapchat. You get the picture. Now, you have to be careful. If you link out of a social media platform, you probably will get slightly reduced reach, because most social media platforms want you to stay native to their platform. So just bear that in mind. So try and post at the best times in the day. For us, it's 8:30 a.m. and 8 p.m. in our niche. You'll want to try and make sure that the image or the headline, the title or the grabber that you're trying to entice people to listen to your download is exciting and enticing. If it's a famous person, just put their name. If you were able to interview Arnold Schwarzenegger, you just put his name. When it's Joe Malone, it'll be Joe Malone, interview with Joe Malone. When it's not such a famous person, maybe lead in with a unique or a mysterious angle or something that seems quite racy and maybe even a little bit controversial or divisive, because ultimately you're sort of interrupting people's attention to try and get them to go and listen to your podcast. it's very important not to get het up on likes and shares and comments. Obviously, we want plenty, but you know, if you have, most social media platforms now are rewarding quantity over quality, and I did mean that, quantity over quality. Now, quality of content is different as well. Let's go to this screen here and talk about quality of content. How do I get the... see, this one?
That's it.
Yeah.
Try it from the black line. There you go.
Okay, so... I think we'll go blue. So you've got your quality of content, and that is perceived by your peers again, you again, your critics again, your market again, but there's one big variable here, and that is the algorithms. I've posted chapters of books which have been proven to be very high quality content. People have paid for that content and you know, shared feedback with me that it's really good content. I've posted it on Facebook and I've had zero reach. I have 134,000 followers now and it's given me zero reach. It's given me a massive algorithm slap in the face. We don't like that content and we are punishing you. I've posted some gimmicky posts that I've copied on purpose to test the algorithm, and it's given me loads of reach and I've had loads of comments. So yes, content for your market is obviously important. Critics, I wouldn't say so much. Peers, I wouldn't say so much. Of course, you've got to sort of buy into it. But you know, I would trade off a bit of that to have more of that and more of that. But if you can't please the algorithm, your content isn't going to get seen by anyone. So this is a testing and measuring and tweaking of podcast titles. If they're too long, people aren't going to click them. If you don't, when you, sorry, we'll go back. Oh, it's the wrong colour.
The OCD.
Oh.
Feeling better?
When you have the feed in iTunes, you've got the image there, Disruptive Entrepreneur. You've got the subscribe button there, although it's not really that shape. You've got the title, I think, there. You've got a bit of a description there. And then what you have is a bit of a gap there. And then you have, it goes kind of a bit like this. And the episodes are here. And then you scroll down. But so if I'm interviewing Fred Dunn, founder, and it's literally, that's it. So it only gives you about 4 or 5 words, not even sometimes of space, and you don't see the rest of the title. So if you put a few waffly words or you don't go straight in with what it is, so I'd probably, a better title would be Bet Fred Owner. Because that's probably more entitled, but most people probably don't know who Fred Dunn is, for example. Or I might put, this would probably be even better, we should do this one. Billionaire Founder. So you have to be really cognizant of your titles And you have to make sure that you get in those first few words something that's going to make people go, yeah, I want to download that. That looks really sexy and interesting and not waffly and wordy. Okay, so we use various competitions and contests and giveaways and bonuses and product magnets. I've launched a podcast called Money, and I gave away free tickets to, these are tickets that I charged for previously, free tickets to an event called Money, a 2-day event. That was a really sexy bonus when we launched the podcast. That helped it get to, Money got to number 2 in all podcasts in the UK behind Happy Place by Fern Cotton. So this is a model that's proven. And by the way, I'm always testing and measuring. So after doing it this long with books and audiobooks and podcasts, you might be inclined to think, is it going to stop working or not be as effective? No, it's just as effective as it was. In some instances, if the product magnet is right, it's even more effective. So I'm going to continue to do it until it doesn't work anymore. Then what happens when you're new and you rank highly early? You go in the new and noteworthy section. And that's great because you get a lot more people who search that and find your podcast than if you weren't in the new and noteworthy section. Because if you think about the business charts, the overall charts, they're going to have a lot of people that go in there and check the charts to see what new podcasts are in or what's ranked so they can listen to it. And a lot of people go into the new and noteworthy section. So you, excuse me, you'll definitely want to appear in there, and you need to, Harry, do you know how long after launch you have to have ranked well to be in the new and noteworthy? Do you have any idea?
It's a few weeks, maybe a few months at most.
Okay, so a few weeks or a small amount of months where you need to have good ranking when you launch your podcast to get in the new and noteworthy section. Excuse me. These live streams are killing me. This is the last live stream I'm doing for a very long time, but I hope you're enjoying it. Killing me, but I'm enjoying it. I actually went to bed at like 11:30 last night, which is about 14 hours later than I normally do. And I woke up about 15 times going, I felt like I was still doing the live stream. And I was like, oh. The studio has this like weird, spooky, ghosty effect. I know a lot of the other guys couldn't sleep very well. All right, so we've done the 3-stage extra bonuses for subscription, review, share. Make them earn the prize and earn the bonus. So a subscription, a share and a review is an earning of the bonus. Now that's good because they will value it more and there'll be more stickiness. And if you've got an event giveaway with your podcast launch, which will be a great thing to do, you're going to get a higher show-up rate at your event. If you make it too easy, you'll just give it away for free regardless. If you just say, hey, if you subscribe to my podcast, then come and do what you want when you want, or you give them the gift before they subscribe to the podcast, then that's not going to work so well. Make sure your prizes, your gifts, your product magnets and your offers are either specific to your niche or Apple products. You can always win with Apple products, and I watch, one of the maybe lower cost iPhones, an iPad. They work an absolute treat. There are loads of people go for it. It's one of the most popular prizes to give away. You could give away one-to-one coaching calls. Now, having a scarcity limit could be good. If you're launching a podcast, there's no way you're going to give a 15-minute one-to-one coaching call away with everyone that subscribes. If you get 10,000 or 100,000 subscriptions, you're going to be like doing calls till 2048. So you could do the first 100 or the first 20, get a 15-minute bonus one-to-one call with me, booked in via my PA. That would definitely get people really interested. I don't know what that means. Definitely get people interested and keen to go on to subscribe to the podcast. With the ranking algorithms, the volume of subscriptions or reviews, but more subscriptions in a short amount of time will give you higher rankings. So you want to do what you can to get most of your subscriptions in a very short amount of time. Like, it's better to get 1,000 in an hour than it is 3,000 in a week, even though 3,000 is more than 1,000, or just basically ram them in a very short amount of time. So we usually do 24-hour launches. because we feel that's long enough for people to be able to make a decision, but short enough to do well with the rankings. We always give people notice a good few days before, because if you do 24 hours without notice, people are like, oh, I missed it. And then you'll have to reopen it again, and then you'll maybe perceived as not being very credible with your marketing, because you might look like you're not telling the truth, or you're relaxing your rules, or you're sort of creating gimmickery with your bonuses that you aren't really to be taken seriously. So again, one-to-ones can work really well, and events can work really well as giveaways as part of your podcast. Now, ultimately, you're doing this to increase the subscriptions, the reach, and the rankings of your podcast. But also, and this is very effective, if your product magnet goes into a sales process. So if there's an event or a one-to-one coaching call that you could then make a respectful offer at the end of, then you're actually monetizing your podcast that way. So you'll notice when I said in the monetize your podcast section, fill your events. So you can use a gift to launch to build good value, and then use that gift to then monetize. So really pretty elegant business model we've got here. So the pre-launch is very important because if you don't give enough warning in the pre-launch, then people will miss it, number one. Excuse me. And number two is you won't have built the urgency, the need, the desire, the competitive element. They may not understand what it is or what to do if you've had to explain it with too short a notice. So when I used to do my launches years ago, I'd be like, hi, it's live. Oh, and by the way, it's live. Now go and get it. And did you get it? And make sure you get it. And I'd just hit you hard on the day. But what is it? How do I get it? What are these bonuses? How do I claim them? All those questions are being asked on the day of the launch, and that's friction. It's a barrier to them going and subscribing to your podcast. So the better the pre-launch process, the less friction and the better subscriptions and rankings you get on your launch. I like now, in the old days of marketing, I just used to say, buy it, and then I'd say, did you buy it? And then why didn't you buy it? And then please buy it. Now with ongoing communication for marketing, for product, services, podcasts, I like to reveal things as I go. So I've got a reason to communicate with you. So first off, I might say, oh, here's some free content from a podcast I'm launching in 2 weeks. Just give you some content. I've just planted that little seed that there's a podcast in 2 weeks. A few days later, here's another piece of content. I hope you enjoyed the first one. The podcast is coming out in 10 days. Here's the date. Put it in your diary. A few days later, I might say, did you remember now the podcast is live in 5 days? I've got a few special gifts for you on launch day. I'll tell you about them in a couple of days. But get yourself ready. And then 2 days before, we're going live in 2 days. I've got this gift and that gift. So book the date in. 1 day before, this is what you've got to do. And then on the day, go. So there's new information. I could give all that information for you in one email, but it's probably a bit, or one Facebook message, but it's probably a bit overwhelming. It's probably, it means I don't get multiple chances to communicate with you. So that and you don't get the chance to layer and build the desire, the hunger, the need, the anticipation, the excitement, which of course the bands are great at doing. Michael Jackson was brilliant at that. He'd go in hiding for a few months, and he'd build this pre-launch and come out and have these massive launches of his albums. And of course, these bands like Coldplay who sell out in 2 or 3 minutes, stadiums all over the country and the world. They know how to build this buzz, this anticipation, this excitement. You should create a Facebook group and a LinkedIn group and any other online communities you could, and forums around your podcast. You can either do the title of your podcast. So I have the Disruptive Entrepreneur community. It has nearly 14,000 members. Or you could just set one up called the Business Community. If Jay has got a business podcast, he could set up a Facebook group called the Business Community and have it as a more general group. But of course, he's going to be positioned as the expert because it's his Facebook group and his community and he admins it. I would start that now. That'll become a great asset in the future. I already said this and I can't re-stress it enough. Share every episode on every platform when it goes live. That is definitely something I don't do enough of, but I suppose I've got other things to post and promote. But I need to do that more because you're not just trying to get new subscriptions. You're trying to get existing subscribers to download and listen to your episodes. because it's not a given, by the way, that people who subscribe will listen to episodes. Ask your guests that you interview to share your podcast on their socials. So when Jordan Peterson and Dorian Yates and Reggie Yates shared our podcast, it got a lot more listens, a lot more downloads. It bumped way up the charts. Thanks to Dorian and Jordan Peterson, we have had 50,000 views on YouTube. So where you can ask them to share, some of them won't. Most of them won't say they won't. I've only had 2 that have said, we don't usually share podcasts that we're on. I've only had 2 do that. So most of them will share. Occasionally some don't. But it certainly gives you way extra reach. The bigger the guest, the more benefit and subscriptions you're going to get when they share it. So don't be shy in asking them to share it. Get on other podcasts, be a guest on other podcasts. You get to plug and promote your podcast, which is obviously great for your podcast. Relaunch every 3 to 6 months with some new sexy offer, some new product magnet, or people have just sort of forgotten a bit about your podcast. In the year, you'll have a settling down of your listenership where you're not really getting that much extra reach because it might be August or a month in your niche which there's not many listeners, or it's just kind of not really built ahead of steam. It's slowed down, and then you want to go with some big relaunch. You could do a launch party. Make sure you go full in again like you did 6 months ago, and again you'll get loads more subscriptions and way up in the rankings, and boom, you're back in the game. Ask your listeners to share and review. That's something I haven't done for ages. I'd say every 2 or 3 podcasts, I used to say, please share the podcast or please review the podcast. I have not done that for a long time. I need to start doing that again, especially as I have a lot more subscribers now. So make sure you ask them, maybe every 3 episodes. I think every episode's a bit too much, but maybe every 3 episodes you could ask them to share your podcast or review your podcast, and you will get more podcast listeners. If you do all of those things, not only are you going to have a great podcast from all the content we covered yesterday and the podcast content you'll get on Podcast Media Masterclass, but you'll also be good at getting it out there and getting listeners and downloads and high rankings, and celebrities contact you and people contact you and want to do joint ventures, or like Jay said, 200 grand's worth of business that he's done in the last year on his podcast. It'll all trickle down. I'm happy to take a couple more questions now, Harry, because we're going to go into a new section. So in the Facebook thread, if you're watching live on Facebook, or in the YouTube thread, if you're watching on YouTube, ping me a question. Harry's going to go and get a couple of them. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in. I'm very grateful to you. This is now our 5th or 6th live stream in this studio. I'm going to take a few months out now. You might have noticed I've been pretty on it since January. I've really wanted to step up in my 40th year. I've created quite a lot of chaos because I've been very busy, even though I've retired at least 6 times in the last 5 or... actually, I've retired about 6 times since I was 27 or 28 years old. But I've been busier than ever, but I've been loving it. I'm going on a bit of a sort of a social media and a promotion and a live stream hibernation, because my book comes out in May, I think, my new book, I'm Worth More, and I want that to have a big impact. I don't want you to think you can get too much of me. So I want to thank you for all the following you've done of me, but you won't be seeing as much of me for the next 2 or 3 months. There is one online training I'll be doing on launch models and launching, because I've committed to do that. But just letting you know that. What's the biggest mistake people make when launching a podcast? I suppose not having enough episodes in the bank, so it looks empty, is one. Not using my launch formula, or not knowing how to do a launch, so it kind of goes live, but it's just like a bit of a, like letting the air out of a balloon. And that's their launch. No one knew about it. That's certainly a mistake. I think when they interview guests, taking too long to get to the question. I think talking over guests, that's certainly, I don't think, a great thing on a podcast. Maybe not having a clear strategy of what the podcast is, maybe not having good enough production value and quality. So there's certainly a good few of them. Balancing building my brand with my work life is challenging. Do you have any advice? Compartmentalize your diary. I wrote a book called Routine Equals Results, which talks about your big rocks, your pebbles, your stones, which are your life key result areas, your business key result areas, and then important income generating tasks. And then the gravel is all the admin and the minutiae, and then the sand and the water, the analogy of filling a jar, pebbles, rocks, stones, gravel, sand and water. The sand and the water is everybody else's emergencies and everything that people want you to do that's not important to you. Non-income generating tasks, minutiae, wasted time. So if you compartmentalize your diary, so dinner with your family, date night with your husband or wife, and going to the gym, and 2 to 3 good hours work on your business might be your big chunks. You put them in the diary every day first. And then you weave around that the smaller tasks, and then around that the rest, and then nothing else gets put in. That will really work. If you read my book, Routine Equals Results, it tells you how to do that step by step. If you have multiple target audiences, is it worth having multiple podcasts? It depends what they are. Like if you've got a health business, and then you've got you restore classic cars, then yeah, you want separate podcasts. If they're in some way linked, you may not, or you could go beyond them all and do like a business or just even a podcast about you expressing your interests. I wouldn't necessarily recommend having too many podcasts. I'd definitely only start with one, but it depends on those audiences and niches. Leonard's asked, how many hours do you spend on making content? I would say making content, well, probably an hour a week for the podcast, because my average episode might be 30 minutes. We do the Rob's Rant or the Caffeine Cast, which is 8 to 15. And then I'd say on average every 2 to 3 weeks we will have one interview, which is like an hour and a half. I'm looking at Harry. By the way, I'm not looking at you here, just sort of getting his acknowledgement of that. So yeah, maybe 60 to 90 minutes max a week of making it, of planning it. I've got it down to about 15 to 30 minutes a week. In the early days, I used to plan more, but now just stuff that happens in the day. I get my iPhone out. That was a good idea for a podcast. Stick it in Evernote, job done, and I look and review it every morning. What type of paid for marketing should I use to grow my podcast? You could test Facebook ads. You could test Google ads. You could definitely do ads on other people's podcasts that are relevant. You could test Spotify ads. You could test boosted posts. You could go to list brokers and get email sends to segments of listeners of podcasts or people in the niche that you're in. That would definitely be a really good start. What will I learn at the quarterly meetup at the podcast agency? All the new strategies that are coming out on monetizing podcasts, all the new results from launching and marketing podcasts, all the updates from the platform providers, the new platform providers. Like a year ago, we weren't talking about Spotify really. We got me on Spotify probably 6 months ago?
Very recently.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah, it actually wasn't that long ago. So how we get me on Spotify, so then how will you get you on Spotify? Obviously it's really new that Spotify have just bought Gimlet Media and Anchor. I try and get my celebrity friends and podcasters and guests to come and do like a keynote talk. So we did a talk with Jake Wood, who's got Pound for Pound podcast. He's Max Branning on EastEnders for about an hour. He probably stayed about 2 hours. It was great to hang out with him. We share successes, lessons. Harry, Tom and Felicity do a little slot on maybe updated equipment and, sort of streamlining the process of using our agency. So yeah, it's and by the way, on one of the levels on our agency, you get lifetime quarterly membership. So that's pretty sweet. My lifetime. Or yours, whichever is shorter, disclaimer. Do you use your podcast to produce content to write your books? Well, Tim Ferriss has, and he did it twice. And we had Richard Reed, who I've interviewed. And whilst I haven't before, because I've written my books exclusively, I am now going to. So Tom and I are working together. He's going to write my book, The Disruptive Entrepreneur, and it's going to be the content from all of our best guests, or the best content from all of our guests, and then my take on that content, and we're going to theme it and create a journey on it and some stages and levels. And then what we're going to do when we do the audio book is Tom, he doesn't know this yet, don't know if he's watching, but Tom's going to read the audio book, but then he's going to interview me, and we're going to do a little sort of mini podcast interview at the end of each section on my take on their content and my experiences. He'll chuck in some fun stuff like when that massive blue bottle crawled up my leg, when we were doing the Boise podcast, and a few other random things that have happened. Yeah, chuck in a whole bottle of water all over Dom Jolly, him dropping the C-bomb about 20 times when my mum listens. Can the book writing boot camp help me write a book? Yes, because it's all about how to write a book, and I take you away to an isolated location and I get you working, writing about 60,000 words in 10 days. Can I get you as a guest if I join your podcast agency? Yes, on one of the levels, you get me as a guest is part of the package. So boom, 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 boom. Right, what we've got coming, the future. Podcasting in the digital media age and your part in it. So the industry is going places. I am very excited about podcasting for the next year. I mean, you know, like 3 years ago, this even wasn't a thing for us, and now it's one of our main things in our agency and one of our main things in our business. So that's a pretty fast growth if you think about it, from nothing to being one of the main things in our businesses. So growth in podcasting is compounding, and it's about 25% year-on-year growth and picking up speed. Ad revenue is up 72% year-on-year, which is good for you because it can obviously fill your pockets and build multiple streams of income for you. Ad spend is predicted to hit 500 million this year and over $1 billion by 2021, which is pretty massive. More mainstream people, celebrities, you know, really well-known people are becoming podcasters, and podcasting is becoming more mainstream. You see podcasters on films now. What was that film that came out recently? It was slightly weird with Will Smith in it. It was like a, what was it? No, it was like almost like a superhero film. Yeah, I think Bright. I think it was Bright. Anyway, normally in films like that, they cut to news, and you know, when there's doing a little scene where the newsreader is reading, and I'd never seen this before, but they cut to a Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe Rogan got his podcast on Bright, which would have had like 100 million people watch that film or whatever. The world has changed, and podcasting is massive, and you really are going to get left behind if you don't have a podcast. There's more and more listeners in every single niche. There's listeners in virtually every country, and if you think about it, the listenership in all the more remote countries is going to grow and grow and grow as internet gets better there, and podcasting in America and UK and Australia is pretty big, and Ireland is. So my listenership is UK, then America, then Australia, then Ireland, then France. It's getting bigger and bigger in these sort of countries where you're starting to get better internet connections, and they're becoming up and coming in the developing world. So the tech is improving for podcasting. To be honest, the tech at the moment is still it's not as refined or as advanced as many engines. If you think about the dynamic feeds in Facebook and LinkedIn, which can feed you content as and when in real time, the algorithms work in real time. Well, when you go on a podcast app, it's a bit clunky. The reviews sometimes don't update on your phone, but do on your computer. You can't interact and engage with the fans, or there's no social element. But now there's dynamic ad insertion, which means that it can retrospectively add different ads. So, you know, for the first 6 months, your first 50 episodes could have ad X, and then it changes to ad Y, so it refreshes and it's dynamic, and you can get new advertisers on. It's going to become more social, more intuitive. It means you can monetize old episodes you hadn't monetized before, and this is all coming. I'm good friends with someone who's on a finance raise, and he's building a podcast platform, and he wants to make it more social, more intuitive, have better tech. Now, of course, word of mouth is something that you're quite lucky to have in business. You need to have been going a long time and have a really good product. But if you think about when you go and watch a great film, you want to go and tell everyone. So word of mouth in film is way easier than word of mouth for business. But like podcasting is like film now. When you go and watch a great film, you want to tell everyone. When you listen to a great podcast and you become a fan, you want to go and tell everyone, oh, you've got to listen to this podcast, it's really great. So word of mouth is a really picking up momentum for podcasting. And of course, as more and more people listen to podcasts, that's only going to grow. So the best time to get into podcasting was yesterday. The second best time to get in podcasting is tonight. Hashtag just saying. All right, so let's do a couple more case studies. Cheers, by the way. We should make the logo bigger. Do you think it's a bit small?
I think it is way too small.
Yeah. We should do some disruptive ones.
I want to do some disruptive ones.
Have you not got the PO signed off? Okay, so Pat Flynn runs the podcast Smart Passive Income. And he's pretty well known in the business niche, but not really so much outside the business niche. He publicly posts what he earns per episode. You can find it online. He earned $167,000 last month from his podcast, and he earned $2.1 million in the last year from his podcast Smart Passive Income. Boom. What he also does, his podcast Smart Passive Income talks about a lot about affiliating for other people's products and services. It's passive because they've already built the product and service and they deliver it and you don't, you just refer to it. Then what he does is on his podcast says, hey, look, I'm an affiliate of X. Would you like to buy the product? His listeners buy the product, and then the next month he publishes the revenue that he made from promoting his product. I think that's a really clever business model. So he's like the teach and sell model. He teaches you how to build smart passive income. He sells to you and then tells you the revenue that he made. Tim Ferriss, who's obviously a podcast legend, he created the Tim Ferriss effect, which is when a product goes on the Tim Ferriss show, it sells out. When an individual goes onto the Tim Ferriss show, boom, you know, they become sort of like a bit of a celebrity in their own right. He only engages with advertisers that are prepared to spend between $50,000 and $100,000 to advertise on his podcast. And he says in a decent year, he'll make $2 to $4 million from his podcast alone. So, you know, like these guys are, you know, breaking ground in the industry, but they're, you know, they're not the biggest. I mean, Joe Rogan, big. Some of these big fiction podcasts, big. But hey, even in the business space, in a narrower niche, look at what people can do, and you can do it too. Remember, they started yesterday. You can start tonight. So, can we get Kevin ready? I'm going to interview another one of our podcast agency clients who's done really well with his podcast. If you have any questions, put them in the Facebook comments or in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel because we put lots of unique content out on YouTube that we don't share anywhere else. In the video interviews with a lot of the guests that we go and see. Of course, if you get to watch the video interview, you see the interaction between us. And whilst podcasts are obviously great, watching the video can also have an added benefit. Kevin, how you doing?
Hi, Rob.
Come and sit on the hot seat. Thanks for coming. You've had a haircut especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll start myself up for a change.
How have you settled back in the UK? We were in Portugal together. We were working together on a speaker boot camp. How are you finding life back in the UK?
It's a whirlwind, Rob,
Yeah.
as you know, with working with Progressive, and I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah.
I've got a service accommodation training to deliver tomorrow.
Yeah.
I was doing a podcast whilst I was waiting to come on in your studio
Wow.
earlier.
Nice.
So a bit of net time,
Yeah.
as you do.
You've really stepped up this year, haven't you? What's made you want to go bigger this year?
I've just been seeing what you've been doing, and I'm in your slipstream, and you've told me to up my game, and you've told me how much more money I can make by taking your advice. And so, as you know, I was resisting for a while, and if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got, and I wasn't getting the results I wanted. So
what you were resisting putting yourself out there more, you mean, and social media and podcasting and content and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was staying inside my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And the thing is about stepping outside your comfort zone, I eventually bit the bullet and decided to do it.
Yeah.
And then once I started to do it, it actually wasn't as daunting as it previously was. It's like feel the fear, do it anyway.
Yeah.
So now I can just jump into the studio over there and record a podcast episode without actually worrying about it too much, whereas initially it was a bit daunting.
Right, what, just because that's maybe not your natural personality, or are you worried about what people might perceive of you? What for you was daunting about putting a lot more content out to the world? Is it critics? Is it the content not being perfect?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we all just strive for perfection, and we think if we can't create something that's perfect, then let's just not put it out there. And then we end up just not doing anything.
Yeah.
And so watching you actually
watching me mess up half the time,
made me realise that, you know what, it makes it more interesting.
That's the worst compliment I've ever had.
It makes it more
Basically,
interesting.
watching you not be perfect gave me the confidence to not be perfect. Thanks, mate. Yeah. But I think that people like honest content. And honest content is if you've got a sore throat, then you go and have 5 minutes break. Or if you're stumbling on your words, you go blur. Or if you do a live feed and you mess it up a bit, you go, sorry, I'm just having a brain freeze. I'll start again, tune back. And I think people can connect to that. They don't want someone who's this idol of perfection, who's untouchable up here. I certainly don't make my content on the podcast perfect. We leave in some of the bloopers, don't we, from time to time, Harry? And so I think it's good that we've talked about that. So anyway, let's talk about your podcast. So the name is the Service Accommodation Podcast.
Yeah.
Which is service accommodation is obviously a really big growing market and business model. Obviously the Airbnb and the Booking.com and people doing the short lets of their houses or even converting properties into sort of fully commercial service accommodations has got really big. So how's it been running your podcast, working with us in the agency, etc.?
I found that people are arriving to events now and they feel like they already know me. Yeah. They feel familiar with me. They feel that they can trust me. And the reason why they're coming to events is because they've subscribed to the podcast. So when people have got an appetite for something, then they will, search online and
Don't nick that.
They will find. Is this my one, Harry?
Yep.
Bit of merch.
Yeah.
And they're finding me online because of the podcast. They're deciding to come and to an event, and ultimately they. I then offer ongoing training. I offer ongoing mentoring, and I've found it's just weird that some people say, oh, they get nervous because it's like you're some celebrity.
Yeah.
But I found that they're more likely to trust me, that they can trust to come on the training, they can trust me as a mentor, and the podcast has definitely helped with that.
Right, so this phenomenon of people meeting you and knowing you before you know them, which is really great for business and also somewhat a bit surreal, isn't it? Was when we launched our first property book and we gave away a set of CDs with it. Back when people used to have CDs in their car. And we did it to sell more books. It was a product magnet. And this was like probably 2008. And then I'd go, all of a sudden when I'm at events, people just come up and like, oh, hi Rob, hi Rob, hi Rob, hi Rob. They recognise your face from the website, but not much. But then all of a sudden they're shaking your hand, asking you to sign books. You know when people shake your hands with two hands for a really long time? And of course you're very grateful, but it's like, whoa, this is different and this is good. And I found that my rapport and my connection with the audience and the members was much better. And like you said, the friction for selling is much reduced. And I think people come up to you and they're pretty convinced they want to do your training because they've listened to the podcast. And really for them not to do it, you would have to probably put them off in some way and make a mistake. And that's a massive thing with the podcast. So can we put back up the elegant, what am I calling it? The trickle-down master plan. Thanks, mate.
I want one of those.
Yeah. What? Whiteboards?
No, Harry.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Not for sale.
Yeah, no. We don't rent Harry
You don't pimp
out.
Harry out. Okay,
No.
fair enough.
Although if you buy him a 12-ounce fillet or a Chateaubriand, then he'll pretty much do anything for you.
He left the meat feast unattended earlier, so I definitely got stuck into
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Right. So if we just go to that one, Harry. Excuse me. So, you know, when they have listened to 20 or 50 episodes of your podcast, how many episodes have you done now, Kev?
I'm on about 20, Rob.
That's great.
I haven't been live that long.
Yeah. 20's still great. I mean, that's 20 weeks. If they've listened to 50 hours, then they basically just slide down here relatively effortlessly. Okay, there may be things that they don't want to do, so they might go over here instead. And then, of course, by this time, they have a chance to then go over to another vertical. 95% of the trust was done there. Whereas if you always have to do the trust here, then that's friction, that's objection overcoming. So you want to do all the trust remotely through your podcast first, and then these conversions and on-sells and lifetime client value and your products, your clients buying from you over and over and over again will dramatically increase. And I don't think anything else can do that as well as a podcast, and here's why. A YouTube channel can obviously do it if it's good content, but what you can't yet do on the YouTube channel is, one, watch it while you're driving, running, on the plane with no internet connection, in the gym, etc. And two, you can't 2 times speed it. But you can 2 times speed a podcast and you can listen to it net timing doing other things. So that's pretty revolutionary. And like, thanks for mentioning the fact that you noticed that. And like when Kevin launches his podcast, not always, because there's got to be some exclusivity, but from time to time you'll give away tickets to your service accommodation discovery day, won't you?
Yeah, so when I'm doing webinars, I sell onto my service accommodation discovery. When I go out and do PPN talks, property networking meetings, I sell onto my service accommodation discovery. But you gave me the advice to do it. What I have done on 2 occasions now is said, look, if you subscribe to my podcast, then I'll give you a free ticket to the service accommodation discovery.
And I guess you give them time sensitive, so you do it for 24 hours or for 50 people or something like that.
Yeah, so depending on which room that I've got allocated to me for the event, I've literally got so many
so you might
seats.
only have 30 for one and 50 for another. So that's A, good scarcity, because it's only 30 or 50 tickets. B, it's believable, because that's the only room you've got. And C, that's good, because if you've charged for it before, it's not fair to give them all for free, but every now and again on a special day, or just because you feel like it, giving 20 or 30 or 50 tickets away is a gift to them. So I think that's good, fair exchange. When was it you, or was it Mark, or was it both? But there was one post that we did on the Service Accommodation podcast, and it put it to number 1 in business charts, didn't it? Yeah,
well, you basically did. You vicariously did it on my behalf and said, look, if people subscribe to the podcast, then you can come to a service accommodation discovery, and it went to number 1 in the world on the business chart. Which
in one Facebook group is pretty amazing. It's not hyper niche, but it's a niche. It's not like health or life or freedom, it's service accommodation. So why did you choose to use the agency as opposed to figuring it all out yourself?
Because I discovered that the podcast was making me a lot of money, because because they were downloading my podcast in order to come to a discovery day, then they were listening to the podcast, and then when they came to the discovery day, they were more likely to buy my further training, and then trickle down, the same people are buying my mastermind. It's difficult to put a finger on it, but the amount of people that are coming and saying, I've downloaded your podcast and I think it's really great content, and then there's more of these people that seem to trickle through onto my mastermind. It's I'm no shadow of a doubt it's earned me in excess of £50,000 already, and I've only been live for a few months.
£50,000 in 20 episodes. Wait a minute, let's see what this works out at if it goes like that. 100,000 in 40, 200,000 in 80, 400,000 in 160, 800,000 in 320. You might be at £1 million by before 400 episodes.
Now, what I
You
knew...
better get in that studio and do it alone.
What I knew is that on my own, by myself, I'm the sort of person that I can do a course and then decide, yeah, I can do that on my own. But I know me now. I know that I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I know that, I mean, Harry's always on my case. Kev, we need another podcast episode. We need another podcast episode. And
Harry is like he's like the cat that you love, but it gets on your lap and you throw it off, and it gets back on your lap and you throw it off, and then it goes around the back of the sofa and you throw it off, and it always finds a way to flick your hand and get you stroking it.
That's the greatest compliment anyone's ever told me.
Because he nags me a lot. Get 6 in the bank,
and
then he won't nag you for a little bit. You'll get him off your back.
I got the initial 6 in the bank, but I've been struggling. But I know that if I didn't have somebody on my case, that I just wouldn't find the time. And that would cost me a lot of money. There's no two ways about it. It would cost me a hell of a lot of money unless I was producing these podcasts.
Yeah, and we've not missed an episode with you?
No, absolutely not. No,
Even though he's chasing you, he's not missed uploading an episode for
Oh
you.
God, no. I mean, it's just really straightforward for me. Now what I'm doing is when I'm doing a keynote speech, I can just record it on a Zoom, H1.
And you're on the level where you can use a studio?
Yeah.
So you just come in and use that for free?
Use that, or I can just send the recording in from when I've done a keynote or when I've interviewed somebody, and all I need to do is give it to those guys, and they will do the stuff that I don't understand how to edit things. I just know that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so they do all that work for me. And yeah, it keeps it going. It keeps my podcast live. Otherwise, it just wouldn't stay live. I know that.
Yeah. Does that mean I sound really bad? My voice is good. Look what I've just been brought: Hall's Soothers, Strepsils, and Jakeman's. That's a sign that I should stop talking. I run back-to-back courses for days. These live streams, boom. Okay, so what would you say to someone that's considering using our agency, but may have their own reservations for doing so?
Do you know what? I would say be honest with yourself. How many times have you procrastinated and put things off, and unless someone's kicking your ass, you don't do it? If you want to have a podcast that is out there, that's edited professionally, I mean, just things like the intro, the outro, and the artwork, and everything that just gets done for you, you can just not worry about it. All you need to do is actually do your stuff and then hand it over to the guys, and they will also push you to do your stuff. Whatever it is your niche is, they will push you to do it. Therefore, you're more likely to do it. Therefore, your podcast is going to keep going, and therefore you can monetize your podcast and make good money out of it, as I have done.
So you got 50 grand out of 20 episodes. Jay's about 200 grand, just short of 50 episodes.
Wow.
So that's really good. And you don't run ads, do you?
Oh, no. Well, I was surprised that I thought that...
But as it gets bigger, like Airbnb and Booking.com, they'd be perfect people to run ads. No one's going to listen to that ad and go, oh, I've had enough of Kev's podcast, he's run an ad for Airbnb or Booking.com, are they?
Yeah, no, true. But in the meantime,
We haven't talked about the contract about that yet, that JV, have we? No.
No, we haven't. Interesting.
Yeah.
So I remember my initial conversation with you, and I was saying, but Rob, if I give away all my stuff in the podcast, all my content, then surely they're never going to buy the training. And you said, Kev, I've been giving away content for years, and there's always going to be an appetite for people to come and get trained with the person that they read their books, they listen to their podcast, they watch all the Facebook Lives, etc. There's still going to be an appetite for it. Yeah. And I just had to say, well, obviously you've been there, seen it, done it, so I just had to wind my neck in and take the plunge. And yes, I give good content on the podcast, but people still want to come and get trained by me.
Well, I've found the more content I give away, the more of my courses that I sell. So I don't have a tease it, hide it, and then sell it mindset. I have a give it away, give as much as I can. We've covered a lot of really good content on this. Obviously, there's a lot more on the Podcast Media Masterclass, But no one could sit here, I don't think, and say there's been no content, and there's been a mixture of interviews and marketing and starting and the equipment, etc. I just don't think the sort of the bait and switch or the tease and then sell works as much as just giving good content. If content marketing is a thing and a lot of people are putting out free content now, which they are, then what's your differentiator? It's better free content and more free content. And like you said, you know, someone can think, oh, putting good content out on this podcast, might they not buy my course? But for every one that might do that, 10 are coming with more trust and more rapport and more connection, and therefore less friction to buy, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain aspects to any property education course in terms of, I can talk about, I was talking about the due diligence process in my podcast earlier on, but what I was talking about is the costs involved in service accommodation. Well, all these costs go onto a spreadsheet, and spreadsheets to spreadsheets, but you need to have training on how to use spreadsheets at the end of the day. A deal analyzer is a spreadsheet. You need to get the training on how to use a deal analyzer. So there's always still going to be a need for physical courses where you show somebody physically how to do something.
Great. All right, thanks for coming, Kev. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Rob.
You live locally, don't you, sir?
I do.
You're all right.
20 minutes up the road.
Yeah, you'll be in bed way before I will. Thanks a lot. Cheers, Kev. Okay, so should you start your podcast yesterday or today? Well, you can't start yesterday, you can start today. So this is the biggest growth industry in media that I am seeing right now. I'm very excited about it. YouTube has peaked, it's obviously still relevant. Facebook has peaked, it's obviously still relevant. Instagram's probably got a little bit of growth, and maybe that's not as peaked as much as YouTube or Facebook. Obviously LinkedIn probably peaked 10 years ago. I mean, everyone set up their LinkedIn account 25,000 millennia ago. But podcast is still on the epic rise. So you can get in early-ish. Now, you did miss out getting in last year, the year before, the year before. Podcast almost had a rebirth. It's almost had two lives. Sort of 10, 12 years ago, it sort of started and then it fizzled out. But you can get in early, get your own media channel, build your media empire. And, you know, hey, look, if you don't risk anything, you risk everything, as I say. I don't think you'll regret trying it. I think you very much regret not trying it. So you have three options from here. Now we are going to do two things. I'm going to give you three options. I've still got a couple more case studies, and then we've got a little bit of content to close up. So your three options are: one, do nothing, which unfortunately some people watching are going to do nothing. You're going to enjoy the stream in your slippers and you smoke your pipe or whatever you're doing while you're watching this stream, and you're going to go, this was somewhat valuable to me or whatever, and then you're going to do nothing. To know and not to do is not to know. So I would challenge that not to be you. You can go and try it on your own. Now, I am up for people giving things a go, but sometimes time and mistakes can be saved by doing option 3, which is leveraging our agency, me, our experience, our mistakes, our network, our team, our studios, our resources, and all of those things. So you're going to do it on your own, and you're going to try and figure it all out yourself. Remember yesterday I said, for you as a podcaster, you should be focusing on content and brand and interviews. That's what you should be doing. Everything else should be done by someone else. So if that's going to be an outsourcer or a VA, or could that be us, our agency? So our podcast media agency, I believe, is one of the first in the world, definitely in the UK. It's completely unique in that we've got, 3 levels of service: the starter, the pro, and the studio pro, whether you want to be sort of a part-time podcaster or a full-time influencer. In our research, we can't find other podcast agencies that offer this service. So the Podcast Media Masterclass is for you to learn everything about podcasting, and then the Podcast Media Agency, which is where we do it all for you. Now, we do have a handful of people who already have podcasts or go straight to the agency without the course, don't we? So you don't have to have done the course because we can do everything for you. But of course, you're going to need to know how to work your equipment and everything else. But the course helps with the marketing, the concept, the content and everything else. And if you haven't got that down, then obviously that's going to be more work to do with us. So we will help you set up your podcast, host your podcast, syndicate your podcast. We will even help you launch your podcast, and we will manage your podcast. You will be doing content creation only. You can, now it depends on levels, but you can use our studios. We've got this studio here that is this Studio Pro level for this?
The highest level.
Okay, so Studio Pro is use this studio, and then there's 2 audio booths there. That can be used on the pro level. We have 6+ outsourcers. We have about 7 staff just in the agency itself. And depending on your level, you get access to all of that. Like Jay said, he can call Tom, Harry, Felicity, his team, and that's really good for your brand. You get to focus on content and a bit of marketing, and we do everything else. It's the baby without the labor pains. We have now, 90 odd podcast clients, and many of those, probably roughly half have launched, and then we're in the throes of launching the rest because obviously some of the clients joined us more recent than others. We've shared some podcasts that have done really well. Steve Sully, his podcast is doing great. Shan's was absolutely epic, Enduring Health. Rob Tyson, who does the mining podcast. There's some small niches and some big niches. We've got Mark Homer's Mark My Words. We've got the Progressive Property Podcast. We've got Money. We've got Disruptive Entrepreneur. We've got millions and millions of downloads a year. I think we've got 400,000 to 500,000 downloads a month across all of our podcasts, which is pretty sweet going. It says they're 80. I think it's nearly 90 clients, around about the 90 mark. And we usually take an intake of 10 max. So we've been building this amount of clients up since we launched. And Jay said he did the podcast a year ago, and he thinks he was the first one on the first course. So, like 80, 90 clients in a year is not a lot. And we don't, by the way, take one a week. What we do is we take an intake of maybe 10, 15, and then we shut for a few months. And then we take an intake of 10 and 15, and then we shut for a few months. Because if we take too many in, a lot of our work is on the setup. We've got to do all the artwork, the hosting, the syndication. We've got to get your 6 in the bank episodes. And that's a lot of our work. Ongoing, there's a lot less work. So we're really strict about intake. Otherwise, our service is going to go down, and that's going to be bad for our brand. So this is a boutique agency. This isn't a massive Google type agency. This is a boutique personal agency. You can come and stop by and have meetings with the team. Like I said, you can use the studio, which is very rare to do, depending on your level. We're also we're rebuilding the UK Podcast Association, because there was a UK Podcast Association in round 1 of podcasting 10 odd years ago, and they wound it down. My good friend Dan Gregory and I are trying to buy those assets and build that back up. That's why I'm doing this lifetime podcast, quarterly mastermind for life, because I'm so committed to create a long-term podcast association. I want us to be the main player in the UK for podcasts. And of course, if we've got a good few hundred of us doing great podcasts and we've got this really great movement, that's going to help my brand as well. It absolutely 100% will cost you way more money and way more time to do it yourself. So why not consider leveraging us? So yeah, like I said, we're at about 500,000 downloads now a month, and growing about 8% per month. So we have 3 levels, and I'm going to talk through them. There's going to be an opportunity for you to go and see these levels online. So here they are. So we have the Starter, the Pro, and the Studio Pro. So on all levels, you get episodes per month. You get Omni hosting, weekly analysis, and 24-hour hotline support via email from our team. So you get those on all levels. You get 2 episodes a month on Starter, 4 on Pro, and infinite on Studio Pro. So I'd be a Studio Pro because I probably on average do 10 to 12 a month. A lot of people, Mark does no more than 2 a month. So you get to pick your level and pick your price based on whether you think you're going to be a big podcaster or a niche podcaster. And that's what I think is good about the agency. So I do have discount prices, but I'll give you the current retail prices. So there's a £1,200 setup plus VAT on the starter, then $199 a month. There's a 1,600 setup on the Pro, and then $349 a month. And then there's a 1,600 setup on the Studio Pro, and then $599 a month. Tom did a lot of research when we set this up, and he reckons a major media agency that might do all your social media, for example, it's going to cost $1,500 plus a month, maybe $2,000. So at $599 a month to get everything, that is a really competitive price. We definitely will be putting up the prices when we reopen this, whenever we reopen it. I have got discounts on those coming, so stay with me, don't go anywhere. So the different levels go as follows. You get iTunes and Stitcher hosting on all of the levels. You get Google Podcast and TuneIn on the Pro and the Studio Pro. You get SEO'd show notes for each episode, which essentially gets more traffic to your podcast on the Pro and the Studio Pro. Ongoing technical support from the team on demand, Pro and Studio Pro. Artwork for your podcast. Of course, we can't have 85 iterations, but artwork done for your podcast on the Pro and Studio Pro. Intro music and voiceover on the Pro and Studio Pro. 5 alternative networks on the Pro, 10 alternative networks on the Studio Pro. So there's a lot of stuff on the Pro and the Studio Pro level. You get the opportunity to become a podcast mentor and run my podcast courses and earn really big money on the Studio Pro level, which Jay and Catherine Turner are very interested in, and they're nearly there and ready. You get quarterly podcast mastermind for life on the Studio Pro level. Now, my VIP program is $50,000 for Rob and Mark. My 6-month Inner Circle Mastermind Elite is $15,000. Even on the gold level, Progressive Property yearly mentoring program is $7,500 plus that. And you're getting quarterly mastermind meets for free for life on the Studio Pro level. There's more. You get book writing boot camp for free on the Studio Pro level, and get this. You get one-to-one mentorship with me. This is what got Jay to sign up when he promised himself he was never going to buy anything. You get lifetime support with me via WhatsApp and email. That's not on property, it's on business and on podcasting, all on the Studio Pro level. Now, like I said, my mentoring programs are $25,000 and $50,000 on the property, on the property and the business, and Inner Circle Mastermind Elite is $15,000. So you're basically getting $25,000 worth of mentoring for free. So that's everything on the starter, the Pro, and the Studio Pro. So let me now give you the discount prices, then I'll give you the number to call. You'll need to be quick. So the discount prices, and this is for tonight only, of course, because we're opening it when the number comes up, and then we'll shut it at the end of the live stream. We won't take another intake. We've got an opportunity in May to do a small intake. We may do that, we may not. And then probably not another one towards the end of summer at the very earliest. So the discount prices for the live stream only is you put just £400 down for the starter level. You put just £700 down for the Pro level, and you put just £1,000 down for the Studio Pro level. That gets you 3 months. So you're live with us for 3 months. Now, we need 2 months notice for cancellations because we've got to pass you back all the assets, and that takes time. So basically, for a tiny deposit and just 2 months payment, you get to try us for 5 months. You're going to know then if we're great, or if you want to do it yourself, or you don't feel like you want to do it anymore. So there's not a lot of risk to you. What's the monthly? There you go. The monthly is discounted as well. Sorry, I couldn't see it there. So on the starter, it's $400 a month, and then $400 down, and then $199 a month. That is a bargain. It's $700 down and $349 a month at the Pro, and it's $1,000 down and $599 a month on the Studio Pro. So your absolute sort of risk is 5 months, and then you can sort of then think, yeah, do you know what? Do I want to carry on or cancel? We've had very few cancellations. We have had a couple of people who've taken their podcast back because it's not right for them, and that's great, and we'll do that if that needs to be the case. But virtually all of our clients have stayed with us. But it gets even sexier. You can basically have lifetime packages, and definitely no one in the world offers this. I've never seen anyone offer this. So for £3,400 with a 50% deposit today, you can have starter for life. You get, now obviously if I die or the company goes bust or you die, then we release ourselves from the contract. But other than that, for £3,400, you get starter package for your podcast for life with a 50% deposit. You get £6,000 with a 50% deposit, and you get Pro for life. And get this, for £10,000 with just a 50% deposit, you get Studio Pro level for life. When I designed this package, Tom looked at me and went, that Studio Pro package is going to cost us a lot of money. There's a couple of things that are making it work for us, and I think will make it so that, we're not into a big loss-making situation. I'll tell you them at one point should you choose. It's absolutely freezing. Thank you very much. So let me summarize it all for you. You can take a screenshot of this when I'm done if you want. So starter, the discounted price, just $400 down tonight and then $199 a month. Lifetime is $3,400 with just 50% down tonight. Pro is $700 down only tonight and $349 a month only. Both of these get 3 months down the deposit and then 2 months notice. And so, like I said, your minimum exposure is 5 months and you've got to try us. And, it does take us a little time to get your podcast live, although it took Jay about 2 minutes. And then the lifetime on Pro is £6,000, which is 50% down tonight. And then the Studio Pro is $1,000 down only and $599 a month for the monthly or lifetime, 50% down of £10,000. And you get to work with me as your one-to-one mentor for life on business and podcasting and marketing. You get the book writing boot camp. You get the chance to be a podcaster, a trainer. You get a quarterly meetings for life on our podcast mastermind. There's a heck of a lot there. It's one of the best offers I've ever made. All right, so just to summarize this, the 3 big bonuses on the Studio Pro, because I'm committed for you to build your brand and empire: book writing bootcamp for free, lifetime podcast media mastermind, and lifetime mentorship with me. That's £34,000 with the previously sold value, not made up money, previously sold value for £10,000 for life. We're looking for just 10 agency clients. That's it in this open round. That'll take us to pretty much 100, which will be a nice benchmark. It takes us time to build. We will build your podcast and get it live in the queue, in the order in which you call the office. So if you're the first, you'll be the first. If you're the 10th, you'll be the 10th. After 10, we will close it, and we won't open it again for a good few months. So it's now officially open. Call 01733 898 557. Do it right now. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do it. You'll need to do it now. So that you can get yourself booked on the agency. I'll put all the levels up in a minute so you can see that on the page. I'm going to close that by the end of this stream. But I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do it now. It says 10:30 we've written on the slide, but I think we finished just a little bit earlier than that. So I definitely wouldn't wait. So let me put it all up there. That's everything. I'm going to give you 5 minutes now to call the team and do that. So should we take some questions while we're letting the people that want to sign up to the agency do that? Okay, so we've got our team in our office that are ready to answer any questions about the podcast, the Starter, the Pro, the Studio Pro, our agency packages. If there's anything you're not sure about, if I talk too fast, I can give you... they can go through everything on the program because I've got a list here. And of course, if it's good for you, they're going to book you on as well. I was told by Tom we had over 400 on at one point on the YouTube and the Facebook live stream. I was told when we made this offer for the agency, we had collated around about 350 people on. Only 10 of you can get this opportunity. So, there's 340 that can't do it because we haven't got room for you. So you want to make sure you do it before the end of the live stream. If I'm on the agency, when will I be able to begin selling your products on my podcast? As soon as you want. I'm game. So as soon as your podcast is live, I recommend you do your first couple of episodes building your own content, maybe not running an ad, but then maybe episode 3 or 5, you can start affiliating with us and selling our products, and we'll give you the links. So pretty much straight away. Will the agency push my podcast out to multiple platforms? That should be answered now. So on the starter level, it will push you out to 2 platforms. On the that's episodes. Let me go back. Yeah. Okay, so on the starter, it's 2 platforms. On the Pro, it's 5. additional plus iTunes and Stitcher. So that's 7. And then on the Studio Pro, it's 10 plus 2, 12. Yeah. Great. Will the agency help me with the podcast artwork? Which level on the Pro and the Studio Pro? Will your podcast agency help me market my podcast online? Actually, I haven't told you this. On the Studio Pro, I'll go on your podcast and be interviewed, and I will promote it to my databases that are relevant. So I have 365,000 subscribers to Progressive Property. We have 170,000 subscribers to Progressive Success, or Unlimited Success, its old name. We have 22,000 in the Progressive group. I have 134,000 on my page. I have 36,000 on LinkedIn. If it's the right podcast in the right niche, I will promote it to some or more than some of those on the Studio Pro level. Well, obviously there for all support on the other levels. Will the agency and the podcast meetups help me grow my podcast? I think without them, it's going to be very hard for you to grow your podcast. How will you know the new hacks? How will you know the new platforms? How will you know the new Patreon models? How will you know what's working for marketing on podcasts? We're always testing new marketing strategies to grow podcasts. We're testing Spotify ads at the moment. So that ongoing education, support, accountability, and the masterminding is really important. Do I get ongoing support with the agency? So on Starter, you get 24-hour access to us via email. On the Pro, you can call in a hotline anytime. And on the Studio Pro, you get all of that, and you can come into the studio and you get WhatsApp and email access to me personally. Will the agency help me follow your launch model and get into the iTunes ranking? So the Podcast Media Masterclass teaches you the launch model. That's where you need that. That teaches you to start and scale your podcast, your concept, your content, the marketing strategies, etc. And I offered that yesterday. If you're watching today and you missed yesterday, or you weren't sure if you wanted to do the course yesterday because you wanted to look at our agency packages, because a lot of people actually said, I'm waiting for the agency. Speak to the team. I'm happy for you to either decide now that you either want to do the course or the agency or both, because I think that's fair. I had said I wouldn't reopen it, but for those of you that didn't watch yesterday, you can sign up to our Podcast Media Masterclass, or if you want to do both, the class and the agency, or just one, call the team on 01733 898 557. Will I get access to your Disruptive Entrepreneur team if I join the podcast agency? Yes, you get access to Tom, Harry, Ben, Aaron, Felicity. That's right, isn't it? And Bella, yeah. Sorry, Bella, I haven't said your name much. Bella loves the limelight, doesn't she? Every time she comes into the limelight, she spills something or trips over or whatever. And Bella, everyone's raving about Bella and her customer service. Obviously, Ben and Aaron are really good at the editing and the streaming. Harry has kind of been promoted into really mostly working on my content. Tom is obviously head of the whole department of innovation both on the podcast agency, but also the social media agency, and obviously also the ongoing research of the industry. Tom knows more about this industry than any of us do. So yeah, you've got all of us on hand. So boom, that's pretty much everything. You just want to go and check if there's a couple more questions, and then I'm going to crack on. Okay, great. I've been given these, but I can't exactly suck them live on the live stream, can I?
That'll sound good for the viewers at home.
Oh, blimey, there's the football on. Didn't even know. Just taking a couple of questions, won't be a sec. Oh, Liverpool 2-0 up. Come on. Come on. Thank you. Right. How long will it take me to record my episode per week? 30 minutes per week, I would say. If you obviously have a couple of bloopers or you need to edit stuff out. That's the great thing about our agency as well. It's not just about how many episodes we put up there. We edit it for you. So Mark used to be, hi, I'm Mark, oh, bollocks. Hi, I'm Mark Comer, welcome to Mark Bollocks. And he literally, it just used to be cut after cut after cut after cut after cut. I felt so sorry. Do you know what we should do to initiate new staff members? get them to edit one of Mark's podcasts. That would be funny. They'll be here a week. So obviously the editing is massive. Should I outsource everything and just focus on creating good content? 100%. That's what I do. That's what Jay does. That's what Kev does. That's what Shan's going to do. In fact, can we get Shan in now? I'd like to get him in now because he's got epic results. Shan followed our launch model to the letter and got to number 3 in all podcasts. It was either in the UK or in the world. It was an epic launch. I remember seeing it going, come on, Shan. I was seeing him going up from 50 to 30 to... Shan, how you doing?
Doing good.
You put your jacket on.
I thought I would, yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. So, Shan, I'm very grateful that you've taken your time to come all this way. So, we're on camera 1.
Okay.
Yeah,
camera
great. So you had a bit of an epic launch, didn't you, on your podcast?
Yeah, I did. I was really not expecting anything like that, but it was all down to what I learned, which was how to get as many subscribers in a short space of time.
Yeah.
And so I think it was probably around about 5 days. I was just pushing it every single social media channel I have, my emailing list, all my friends, family. I would grab their phones, hit subscribe, and pick up my son from school, and I'd go to all the parents and this is launching.
I didn't teach you that bit.
No, you didn't.
No,
This is me improvising.
Yeah.
That was Wednesday the 5th, and I think by the 10th, it was actually quite fortuitous because that was when we hit number 1 in health. Yeah. Which was the same day I was speaking.
Health is a massive section as well, isn't it? Yeah.
And that was the same day I was speaking in Parliament.
Wow.
So that was a perfect opportunity to say, I'm best-selling author and number 1 podcaster.
Wow.
And then I saw people checking their phones just to verify that that was the case.
Yeah.
So
that was the perfect day.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, great. And how many episodes are you in now on your podcast?
We've just done episode 14 today, and today is about supporting well-being in pregnancy. We've got a consultant obstetrician with a special interest in perinatal well-being. Fantastic episode, and but all the episodes we've had some really incredible people talking about natural ways to
Enduring
improve
Health.
Yes, it's called Enduring Health. Thanks for that title.
That's all right. We had quite a debate on the podcast course, didn't we about the title?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's nice because I think the title of a health podcast is something that you could get quite wrong, isn't it? And you could maybe overclaim or overpromise, or it could be maybe be a bit too technical and sort of sciencey. And I think Enduring Health, you've got like a nice catch-all. I always say to everyone when I work with them, yes, you're going to be in a niche probably, but we want your niche to be as wide as possible, because if it's too specific, you've got obviously less listeners. And Enduring Health is a podcast that could just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So, and obviously the scope for the guests that you could have and the content that you could have, you're never going to run out of content on that one.
No, it's such a broad area, and it's also very interesting because people do want to now take a bit of ownership and responsibility over their health. We're seeing people increasing now, they don't want to go on medications. Some are sort of not really trusting the medical system quite as much as we used to. And I think it's important to have these conversations about health and well-being and what we can do to take care of ourselves better.
So you, can you remember who was number 1 and number 2 in the, it was either UK or global charts I saw when you launched, because you were number 3, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
How
that happened, I had to pinch myself when I saw that. But I do know Joe Rogan was number 4.
But to be above Joe Rogan.
But that was just literally for an hour or so.
But so what? Don't say that. So what? You're allowed to own that, aren't you? Yeah, but you're allowed to own the fact that you're above Joe Rogan. And you're being honest, but you're allowed to be proud.
Yeah, well.
Do you know how many downloads he gets?
How many we've had per episode?
No, Joe Rogan.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, get this, and then you'll feel good about being above him for an hour. He's had more than 3.5 billion downloads.
Wow.
Yeah, 3.5 billion.
Wow.
So being above.
Do you remember?
Is epic. I mean, how many downloads an hour must that be? 3.5 billion.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So I love people like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss and all these big podcasters because they're just paving the way for people like us. We're the I suppose the level down because they've been doing it a bit longer and they're celebrities, but that just shows us where we can go. Yeah. So why did you decide to use our agency and do the podcast course as opposed to just trying to do it all yourself?
Well, I was actually in two minds. I came to your 2-day event, came highly recommended to me, and it was brilliant because you basically broke it down to show people how they could do it themselves. There was no sales for the first day and a half. It was all about, this is how you do it. This is how you want to set up your niche. This is what you do with your title. And then I was all, quite interested in setting it up myself. And then when you described what your agency actually does and how much of that is outsourced and what you take care of, I thought, well, that's going to, free up a lot of time for me.
Yeah.
And what I enjoy doing in the podcast, and I absolutely love doing the podcast, by the way, is speaking with really interesting people, really cool people who inspire me, and who have a great message to put out there around health. And so if I can just focus on that, and then get the recordings over to your team, and literally, I sent a recording on Saturday. And then by Monday, it was fully edited with the show notes ready to go for this morning's launch.
Harry's bailed me out of some last-minute podcasts a lot of times. So, yeah, that's great. And you're an author.
Yes.
Podcasting is not the only thing you do, is it? Do you just want to tell everyone a bit about your business and how you see podcasting fitting into all the other things you do in your brand?
Absolutely. So I'm a general practitioner, but I also have an interest in natural health and wellness, what we can do to look after ourselves. From a lifestyle perspective, many medical conditions are in fact lifestyle conditions, and a lifestyle problem needs a lifestyle solution. So that's what I try and educate and teach people and support people around that. I work with organizations, with businesses who want consulting around wellness programs, and also work at an individual level for people who are looking not just to get better and be free of illness, but actually have energy and well-being and vitality to improve performance. Because that's really what it comes down to. Everything we do in life centers around how healthy we are. Yeah. And without great health, everything else can start to potentially fall apart. So that's my real passion there, and that's what I really love doing.
And why did you decide to do a podcast in that space and sort of build your business around a podcast?
It was something you said actually in August. We hadn't met. We've got a lot of mutual friends, but I think it was a LinkedIn post that you did about podcasting and the potential that it has. And I thought about it really carefully, and I thought, well, I don't like YouTube in terms of doing a YouTube video. That's not for me. It's great for you and it's great for a lot of people.
But I'm not that great at it myself.
Blogging, I kind of like blogging, but it's kind of tiresome really. What do I enjoy doing? And I thought, well, actually podcasting, I really love talking to people. I love learning from people and sharing ideas, and spitballing is a great word you use. And seeing what comes out of those conversations. I thought, well, why don't I do that? Start recording it and see if anyone wants to listen.
Great. And what would you say to someone who, a bit like you said you were in two minds at one stage, if they're considering using the agency?
Give it a go. Give it a go. See what happens. You've got to give it your best and make sure that you've got a good message to put out to people, and coming from a place where you really want to help. But I would say if you have even the slightest interest, then look into it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And your future, where do you see your podcast going? Have you got grand plans for it, or are you just enjoying the ride?
Well, I never actually got to #1 in all podcasts.
Yeah.
So maybe 5 minutes there would be good. Well, I want to carry on doing what I'm doing now, and just keep on scaling it up, getting more and more guests. We've had some, like I say, some fantastic guests. Some real heroes in health and well-being, and we just want to continue that journey and hopefully increase the subscribers, the listeners, and help reach as many people as we can.
Great. We were chatting out there before, weren't we? And we were sharing ideas of guests. You were suggesting guests that I could have. I was suggesting guests that you can have, and I think that's the great thing about being around fellow business people, podcasters. I gave my friend a helping hand to get Dorian Yates on his podcast, and he's just interviewing him at the moment, who's obviously a massive, massive name. So the great thing about being in that sphere, a lot of my podcast guests are actually ideas from other people, because I'll ask people, who do you think I should have on my podcast? The author we're both quite familiar with, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I think we both agree has done some good work.
Absolutely.
I'd actually like to interview him, but I actually want to wait for you to interview him first, because I think he's more conceptually right for you. There's just so many great people. The gift that you get to sit with interesting people and and share time with them. Like, in a way, we get this selfish need met because we're doing an interview for the listeners, but we got the best seat.
Absolutely.
And we learn the most.
You're spot on there. I was telling you in the room earlier on that I spoke with a gentleman from San Diego who's a fitness trainer as well as an entrepreneur, and he's at 3% body fat. And he just looks incredible. Same age as me, but just looks 20 years younger.
Yeah.
And I said, right now, I want you to break down your exact fitness and diet regime from beginning to end. And he did, and it was episode 13. It was really simple.
Wow.
And so I spoke to him beginning of February, and we're now at the end of February, and I've dropped 5% body fat just by incorporating that really simple approach. And these are the things that we can,
Episode 13, I need to listen to that
Episode
one.
13, yeah. He's a lovely guy as well, really down to earth and humble, and very straightforward approach that he has.
Yeah. Wow. Well, look, I want to say once again, thanks a lot for coming.
You're very welcome.
I know you made sacrifices to be here, and as a fellow rock and metaler as well. So thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.
Cheers. Thanks,
Take
Shan. Do you want to just give your podcast a quick shout out?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So Enduring Health is on all the channels, on the usual channels, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Podbean. And it's great. Yep. Just download. The message I want to really give is the more you listen, the healthier you'll get.
Yeah.
And the ideal approach is just to listen passively, subconsciously learning, and then as a result, we just start to make better health decisions.
Great.
Okay.
Health is wealth, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So, and if you want to get a recording of this as well, we'll get the team to give you that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Great. Thanks, Shan.
See you soon.
Yeah. See you soon. Okay. Right. So that was his podcast, Enduring Health. I'm definitely going to go and listen to that 3% body fat chap on episode 13. So make sure that you do that. Okay, so let's move on to the final session then. If there are any questions, let's get them collated. If you want to, post any questions and you haven't done already in the YouTube or the Facebook thread. So how to launch and market your podcast to #1 status part 2. So the first thing on the part 2 of launching your podcast is to make sure that you have 6 in the bank. If you have a podcast and you've got 1 live, that doesn't look good. So you want to already have minimum 6 live so that when someone lands on your podcast, they can see it's an existing podcast. It's got some episodes. Also, people like to binge podcasts. They like to listen to more than 1 episode. So that's tip number 1, so that you don't get this bounce rate. Harry, could we get the questions if there are any more? All right, great. Make sure that the pre-launch is big. So Shan said he followed our launch model that I taught him on the Podcast Media Masterclass. But he did a lot in the pre-launch. He said for the 5 days before, he was telling everyone. He was getting, awareness out there. He was literally even getting people's phones and getting them to subscribe manually, which of course I'm not suggesting you do, but it doesn't hurt, but it's just not very leveraged. But posting on social media, emailing out to all of your contacts. I know what Jay did, which I thought was a good strategy, which he said, look, I'm just looking for a bit of support. I'm launching a podcast. It's really big for me. Would you help me by subscribing? Rather than sort of it being salesy to his friends, he sort of asked for help, which I thought was a good play. And then you build up over those days a bit of free content that's coming, a bonus that you're going to give away, the time frame of which you're going to launch, and then the time frame at which you're closing the launch. So maybe some future episodes that are already live, etc. On launch day, the things that will build probably the most amount of subscriptions and shares is desire, scarcity, and urgency. So desire is how much, not do I just want this podcast, but I've been waiting for this podcast. Like I've been waiting for the next series of Billions forever. I've been waiting for the next series of Game of Thrones forever. And I want Billions and Game of Thrones bad. And if you've managed to build up a bit of that, I want this, not just it's coming, but I want this, it will go big on launch day. So that's desire. Then now, of course, if you've interviewed some good guests, that will create great desire. Scarcity. So scarcity is, I'm going to give away 51 to 1. If Shan was doing it, for example, it might say I'm going to give away 51 to 1 health consultation calls over the next 2 months, first 50 only. That would be scarcity of only 50. Scarcity might be for the next 24 hours only you can get this gift or bonus. And then urgency is, I guess, the desire and the scarcity in a melting pot that makes us go, I need to subscribe to it now, or I don't know how to work out a podcast. Rob, will you show me how to work out a podcast? What's the app? How do you download it? Oh, but Rob, I'm not even on iPhone, I'm on Apple. Okay, in that case, you need to go to Stitcher, etc. Do you mind if I just check the football scores? So that's desire, scarcity, and urgency. Bonuses we've already talked about. The better the bonus, the better the podcast growth will go. Remember, you've got the launch of your podcast, bonus 1. Share the podcast, bonus 2. Review the podcast, bonus 3. And you maybe weave them out over a few weeks and have a bit of respite in between so that you know it's not too much too soon. The open and shut model is the 24 hours, the 48 hours, or the takeaway bonus. And most of my launches are open and shut. One, because often we don't want to take too many clients on, for example, with this agency, which shuts at the end of this live stream. Or because I know if I don't shut it, people won't ever do it. You know, you've been given books and never read them. You've been offered things and never taken them up because there wasn't any fear of loss. It wasn't going to be gone. I think it's smart to prepare a 4-week timeline when you build up to your podcast. Now, of course, I'll cover all this in detail in my launch model on the Podcast Media Masterclass. But you want to work 4 weeks out, you might want to, for example, let's say you're recording 6 in the Bank in the studio there. And your podcast is due to launch in 4 weeks. You might just do a little photo in the studio and go, I'm just recording my first episode of my new podcast. You might even share the name. And then a few days later, you're maybe going to say, actually, you know what? I haven't quite decided on the name. I thought I was going to go with Enduring Health. Can you give me any suggestions on what you think a good name for my podcast would be? I prefer Enduring Health, Lasting Health, and Health is Wealth. Please vote or give me your suggestions. And then you vote and then you get some suggestions and then maybe you go with your original one because they weren't better, or you've got a better one that you go for. And then a few days later you say, I just want to thank you because we decided on the name, we decided on Health is Wealth, and the podcast is going live in 2 weeks' time. And you layer it and you add the bonus and you add the instructions. You might even do a little video of how to subscribe to a podcast in there, because a lot of people don't know how to subscribe to a podcast. And you build up to that launch day. And then you could just literally plan that like a Gantt chart or in your diary. And when you're 4 weeks out, you're only doing like a post every 3-4 days, or maybe even 5 days. And then towards the end, you're doing them maybe nearly every 1 to 2 days. Make sure you post everywhere on social media, on all forums, in as many groups as you can where the guidelines allow you to post about podcasts, in all the podcast related groups, on the threads that you can post on. Emails to your database, maybe even text messages to people who've opted in. Anywhere and everywhere you can market this podcast. You might even run Facebook ads on the day. You might boost posts on the day. You might run Google AdWords on the day and have a budget of a few £100 so the world sees it on that day. Now, of course, some people are worried about doing that. Oh, if the world sees my podcast, are they going to get annoyed? No, you want the world to see a podcast on launch day. No one else is complaining, oh, bloody hell, Rob's launching a podcast. It's bloody everywhere. If no one's saying that, you're not launching it hard enough. If any people comment or share or respond to any of your posts on your podcast launch or your build-up, make sure you reply to them, you thank them, you answer them, because then that'll build up goodwill for them to do more of that on launch day. Oh, there's more. Now you can go one step further on this. Step 1, you launch it to your community with a bonus. Step 2, you ask people to share it for another bonus. Step 3, you ask them to review it for a bonus. Step 4, you go out to other people, joint venture partners, influencers on social media, or you pull in favors and you get them to promote it for you. Now, of course, someone posting on social media, it might reach a few hundred people. But, you know, if someone like myself emailed 365,000 property investors for a property podcast, that's going to get massive subscriptions. That might even go to #1 in the UK. So that's sort of like the next level of getting influencers and joint venture partners. An influencer you might have to pay or sort of do a bit of a favor with. A joint venture partner, they promote your podcast, and then in 4 weeks' time, you promote their podcast, and you do like a reciprocal. Repurposing content, multimedia, we've covered that loads of times, at least 4 times. It's just a reminder, make sure that you just see that every platform has got content about your launch on it. If you have contacts in your email database, make sure you message them. Maybe do the ask for help approach. On your launch time, you know, like the days before and the days after, get yourself on other podcasts and be interviewed on other podcasts so you can plug your podcast. Boost posts or run sponsored ads, but make sure you test first on a low budget. I sort of said that before. Be relentless, be prolific. If you piss a few people off, so be it. You know, I piss people off breathing. That's just the way it seems to be. So fine, I'm just going to deal with that. I want to make sure my podcast gets out to the world. A few moaners. Oh, I'm posting this podcast everywhere. It's so bloody annoying. Well, it's free. You can always unfollow me. We're currently testing more paid ads, such as Spotify. We're testing doing guest shows. We're testing doing joint venture shows. We're testing Amazon ads for books, which obviously helps bring people into my podcast world because my podcasts are laced within my books. So on the Podcast Quarterly Mastermind, we'll update you on all of these. Of course, with Spotify buying Anchor and Gimlet Media, that's going to change the game. Spotify have just changed their ad platform to be like a lot more like Facebook. So I guess there's going to be a lot of opportunity for us to grow our ad spend there and grow our followers to our podcast and trickle down into our social media and our other assets. So there's way more testing we're doing. We're testing to try and find new lists, joint ventures databases where they have a lot of podcast followers. So yeah, this is something that we're doing a lot of, and we will let you know how it goes on the quarterly mastermind meetups. All right, so final questions then. Rob, if you were starting again, how would you monetize your podcast from day one? I'd probably set up a Patreon. I haven't done that yet. In a way, I'm kicking myself. But the reason I haven't set up a Patreon is I've always thought people won't want to donate to me because I'm already pretty wealthy. And I guess, perceived you needed to be a bit skint or starty-outy to do that. But you know what? I need to get over myself. You know, if I can invest that, maybe I could just raise the money and give it to my foundation. That's probably a good idea. So I'd probably, the best way to monetize it from day one would be Patreon probably, because I wouldn't run ads straight away. I know some do in America, but I wouldn't. Just because I want you to get rapport and good connection first, and ads, especially in the UK, could disrupt that a bit. So that's probably the best way. Thank you. We've had millions of questions tonight. Yeah. Is it possible to have interview guests on my podcast when they can only call in? Yeah, we do Skype interviews. I prefer face-to-face. There's the rapport element. It's easier. There's not the delay. There's not the tech issues. When we interviewed Jackie Stewart, who's obviously a mega guest, we had about 10 minutes of tech faffing, and then he had about 10 minutes of tech faffing. Yeah, I would rather do face-to-face. Now, go to them because it's much easier. Now, we have a studio here, and some people will come to us. I interviewed England footballer Kieran Richardson, and he came here. He's become a good friend of mine. He sources my watches for me. But yeah, I would go to them for sure. I think face-to-face is better, but when we can't get face-to-face because they're in America, how many Skypes do you reckon we've done? A fifth?
I would say we've probably done about 15 to 20 Skype interviews.
So 15 to 20
out of 80.
Out of 80. So yeah, a sixth. And we only do that when, I mean, I would go to America for some people, but we know when it's not practical for me to go to America and they're in America or Australia, or where was the human spider? Where?
Bali.
Bali. So yeah, you can. I think we do Skype because then you can record the recording, but you could just do a call-in, couldn't you? You could just do the audio. You wouldn't have to do the video. Can I have a podcast with the same name as someone else? You can. Yeah, there's no IP on that.
There's 6 different Mark My Words podcasts.
There's 6 different Mark My Words podcasts. So you can. But not Disruptive Entrepreneur.
It's trademark.
Yeah. Disruptive Entrepreneur actually is trademarked. It actually is. You know the story, don't you? Yeah. So get this. This is quite funny. I'm going to say it. So I obviously have the Disruptive Entrepreneur brand, and I got a quite snotty, threatening letter almost a cease and desist to not use the word disruptive entrepreneur anywhere, because this company said that they own disruptive design. And we replied going, well, that's disruptive design, and this is disruptive entrepreneur. No, and they kept sending quite threatening letters. So I kind of didn't think that added up. So I got my lawyer on it, and we applied for the disruptive entrepreneur trademark, and we got it accepted. And I have a trademark and an official number, and now anyone can send any letters to me about whatever words I'm using, but if it has disruptive entrepreneur in it, they can put it in their pipe and they can smoke it, because I can use it and I can stop other people using it. Now, I didn't do it for that. I kind of did it as a defensive way to make sure that people aren't nicking my assets. And I actually wasn't really bothered about trademarking it because, like other people use the word disruptive. I don't own the word disruptive. I don't own the word disruptive entrepreneur. I'm sort of in the mind space I might, but I don't own those words. But, if someone wants to start playing with me, then I can dance with you. Now I have the trademark for it. I'm thinking of doing paid for content, half for free and half paid. Is that a good idea? I think it is a good idea. Have some freemium, some premium. I think it's a good idea. If I needed to monetize my podcast, if you could just click back one more time to the trickle down revenue master plan. If I didn't have all of that and I needed to run my podcast, I'd run my podcast. Okay, cool. So yeah, I don't need to monetize my podcast, so I don't. And to be honest, it probably makes us a bit lazy. Because we don't need to monetize it, we don't. So we don't run ads and we don't do Patreon, and we want to set up a Patreon and we're doing it, but because we put other things in the way. But someone's just said here, what do you think, Tom? I'm thinking of doing paid for content, half for free, half paid. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, really smart idea. Sorry,
Tom's
we're sharing a
talking into
microphone.
Harry's mic. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, there are quite a few podcasts out there that have that model where they give some away for free and then the rest is paid for. Some podcasts I follow that are really good at doing that. Yeah, really quite common that.
Yeah.
Because you're already creating content, so it's no more effort for you. You just paywall half of it, off you go.
Yeah. Just checking the football while you guys are talking. Man U have just scored. Man City have just scored. Filthy animals. All right. What's your relaunch formula? Ooh, you want my IP. So it depends. I might run a competition or a giveaway, which we covered a bit. I might ask for a review or a share, which we covered a fair bit. I might just go to new communities and do paid for advertising in areas where they've not heard of the disruptive entrepreneur. So there are 3 ways that we've relaunched in the past. We don't change the assets. Tom, we did talk about changing the cover, didn't we? And I think if we relaunched and changed the cover, it might have the perception that it's been freshened up. How should I go about getting my first guests? I would message them on Instagram. I would find them on all their social media platforms and I would just engage with them. We have probably about 2 hours in the podcast media masterclass on getting really good guests, because getting a guest you can do. Getting a big guest is a lot harder. And we've got about 5 or 6 things that we do that really work for us to get big guests. Smaller guests, just ask them on their social media. Make sure you're quite succinct with your request, i.e. don't send massive war and peace messages, because they probably won't read them. And work your way up, and maybe call in a couple of favours of guests you might know, of people who are quite well known, that are friends of friends. What membership content should I start off offering? I don't really know what that means. It might mean what premium content should I start off offering. Is there a difference, Tom, between the... come and sit here, Tom. Is there a difference in terms of quality or style of the paid for content and the free content, or is it literally just extra?
So a lot of the ones I listen to, they will do. So there's one I listen to that's really good where on their premium content, they give you a higher quality audio feed. They give you no ads, all the ads are stripped off, and you get extended episodes. And those 3 things don't require a massive amount of work from them.
Better quality and more and longer content.
Yeah, and it's really simple.
Yeah.
The thing is, when people are fans of your podcast, what they're fans of is you and your content. So the easiest way to get money out of them is just to do more of what you're already doing.
Yeah.
If we wanted to make money from Disruptive Entrepreneur, the best way for you as a prolific content creator for us to make most money, I wouldn't say is doing ads, would just be to do more episodes that you charge for.
Yeah.
Because we know that's what people want.
And
that's what people are tuning in for
Yeah.
in their tens of thousands every single week.
Maybe you could do it with good guests.
Yep.
Or really sort of unique bonus
Yep,
content.
behind the scenes stuff, that kind of thing, all
Yeah.
that works really, really well.
Yeah. Cool. What type of product would you offer to get people to subscribe? So I like lead magnets. So in my niche, things that people love are sort of shortcuts. So if they can get my set of KPIs for my business, they love that. If they can get my proven sales copy or posts or my sort of trickle down revenue business model, they like that. They like events. It depends on what you offer and it depends on your business model. If you're quite well known in your niche or you have a good niche, consultation calls and advice from you, I'd go 10 or 15 minutes. So they certainly work. There's a good few there. Can I upgrade or down packages if I sign up? They can, can't they?
Within your first 90 days, the first 3 months, you can upgrade or downgrade packages. That is the time we use to assign all our resources. Obviously, like you said, we only have a certain amount of intake in, and that's so we can make sure we deliver the correct service, the highest level of service to everyone. So after those 3 months, you're locked in on what you've got in on, because if someone upgrades and they take up a load more resource, I don't want to hurt other people. So we allow you in your first 3 months to upgrade or downgrade, but after that, you'd have to, ask, and we may not have the space available for you to do so.
All right, thanks, Tom. How many episodes should I have before I run a live event? It's not really about episodes, it's probably about subscribers. So did we do a live event on our 50th episode?
50th, we did a joint episode, which we did recorded over Skype because you were in Cayman. And then the 100th episode, we did a live episode with an audience.
Was that the first one in there?
Yes.
Yeah. When this wasn't here.
Yeah.
The 100th was we did loads of interviews on Skype in the old studio. The 150th is where we had Joe Valente in the meeting.
Oh, okay. So we had about 60 people, 50, 60 people squeezed in that room.
Yeah.
We didn't really mega push it, did we? So 100 episodes in and we had 60 people in a room, but like I said, we didn't majorly push it. I'd feel pretty confident if we wanted to do a live event just off the podcast, we'd get 250, 300 in a room, even though a lot of our subscribers are abroad. So maybe 50 episodes?
Yeah, and I think it depends on your content as well. There's a podcast that's been quite popular recently, which is a guy who's basically a part-time comedian, but he's really funny, and he basically just records the weekly pub quiz he does at his local pub. And you hear all the back and forth with all the people in the pub, his banter in between. So he's already doing it. They're paying to be at the pub quiz, and people will now pay more and more to attend that pub because they want to be part of that experience. So he's effectively selling live events from the very first episode. The live event is the podcast. And you'll see, especially outside of the kind of business sector of podcasts, in the sector of kind of entertainment, there's a lot more live episodes, so because people want to be part of that. We talked about how did this get made earlier. They sell, they fill a theatre every time they record their episode, hundreds and hundreds of people there, multiple tens of thousands, in profit before they even record their episode.
Yeah.
So you could do it really early if you've got the right content for it.
Great. So we have 2 questions left, and then we're done for this podcast online summit, which isn't going to be recorded and isn't going to be shared. So well done for getting on it. So before I take these 2 questions, this is your last chance now to get on any one of our 3 podcast media agency packages, the starter, the pro, or the studio pro levels. So there's everything there. These 2 questions, and then we're done. They're done. That was a note from you, from you. So you've probably got about 2 minutes left to jump on that, and then it's closed. I think we answered with this yesterday, but this person might not have been here yesterday. Would you recommend getting a co-host for better rapport? So you do your opinion, I'll do my opinion.
So I think you can have a co-host if it's the right content, and if you're definitely someone who struggles to generate content, a co-host can help if you're less confident. Although only today I was reading when I was doing some research on podcasts and the ones that sell best. There's this talk of, we talked about the Tim Ferriss effects earlier on, and people talk of the Oprah Winfrey factor, which is, when people just listen to you for half an hour or an hour every single day, the relationship they build with you is so powerful that you could sell them anything. So the podcasts that really make the most money are individually hosted podcasts, because you build a very strong, powerful relationship with that one person. So I think you've got to kind of gauge it by what it is you want to achieve. If you're looking to build a brand that you're going to sell off of, and you're going to sell services or products, I would go it alone, so you can build that really powerful relationship. If you're looking at doing something else, maybe you want to do a Patreon, and you're going to grow it through having people purchase more of your content, do it with a co-host so you can churn more content, produce more, sell more. That's probably the way I'd look at it.
I think it also depends on your personality.
For sure.
So someone like me, it's probably not going to be that easy to have a co-host. I could work on it, but it's probably not going to be as easy. Someone who's maybe a bit reserved might like one. If you've got particularly great rapport with someone, that could be good. Jake Wood and Spencer Oliver do theirs. Obviously, there's lots of co-hosting podcasts. Wow, they keep coming in. This is great. I think what you've got to remember is, if you've got a co-host, you've got to put the diaries in. You've got to be both free at the same time. There is extra admin there. What about if there's two of you and then you interview one guest? That might be sort of a bit weird.
I think for you, as someone who, you have a lot of spontaneity, like the freedom you have from doing it on your own, you would never get with a guest. I know from Harry and I know from your recordings that sometimes you get up in the middle of the night and you sit in your studio at home in your pants and record an episode. And if you had a co-host,
you've just completely...
You wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for... that was my, what do they call it? Guilty pleasure. I just had an idea pop into my head. But something I'd really like us to test. So you might have noticed a bit more now. Tom and Harry have done introductions to the podcast. They're very much more now involved in the podcast. I bet there's quite a lot of people out there that know you because of the podcast, and I'd definitely like you guys to be involved more. And I would like some guest hosts. We've got to work this out somehow. But yeah, I think that's something we could do, or a guest co-host.
Yeah.
Cool. How can you differentiate with the 3 podcasts like my niche? 3 other podcasts like your niche, that's nothing. Like if I only had 3 other podcasts in the business section, I'd be laughing all the way to the bank. How do you differentiate? Well, I helped, but Shan ultimately decided and came up with it. But Shan's is Enduring Health. Jay's is Business Mentor Podcast. So they are in that space. They've got the word health and the word business in it, but they differentiate it. Scroll down the top 200 charts like we did yesterday and pick up some innovative names and some innovative ways. Let's do that now, in fact. Let's have a look.
To add to what Rob's saying, I think, because, I always say I think people's listening to podcasts is really about gelling with the personality of the person you listen to. There are lots of podcasts out there that would be super useful to me, but I don't listen to because I don't engage with the host. So I would say maybe a bit nebulous answer, but be better than them. Do more research, produce better content. Engage with your listeners more, and that will go a long way without having to have any gimmicks to just beating them out in if you've got people that are in a similar niche as you.
So Happy Place, I think that's a really cool concept. That probably sounds like a positive podcast, a mindset podcast, a sort of living a generally happy life podcast. But the way that's been titled, makes that completely unique. 2 words. Love stories. I mean, obviously there are loads here. I'm just picking some out. The high, low, to me, a bit nebulous. Under the Skin with Russell Brand. Obviously, that's more around his brand. On Purpose with Jay Shetty. That's a good concept. That's obviously about living a life on purpose, and he just calls it On Purpose. So if you think about it, it's not that difficult. What I'd do is go into your niche and look at what else is there, and then try and come up with a word or a phrase that is different. Open Goal, a football show. There you go. Dr. Phil, fill in the blanks.
Fill in the blanks.
That's average stroke poor, like I used to get on my reports.
But just as Rob's looking at now, when people are browsing for podcasts in the iTunes app, before they ever hear the quality of your content, they judge your podcast on your artwork and your title. Like, you could have the best podcast in the world, you could give away money for free on your podcast, but if your artwork and your title aren't enticing, nobody is going to listen to it. So, you know, obviously if you come in the agency, we help you do your artwork, we help you come up with an engaging title, but even if you do it on your own, really spend the time, because, you know, like its own little mini marketing funnel, like the saying says, you are judged by your cover, very literally, and no one is going to click on it if you haven't got nice, high quality artwork and a really engaging title.
So Stuff You Should Know, that's a very famous podcast, and that's a great concept.
Yeah, good piece of artwork as
iHeartRadio, so they've obviously invested in that. The Red Pill, that's cool. The Red Pill, the blue pill, the red pill, I like that. So when you think about it, some people just call it their name, but I think, you know, unless you've got a name, I wouldn't do that. I Like Films with Jonathan Ross, there you go, very simple. All right, great. So, hi Rob, I have a new product I'm bringing to the motor industry. Would doing a podcast on this benefit me? A podcast on the motor industry is massive. So I would go through all the motor podcasts and try and find a sort of a quite unique niche. But for me, that's a huge enthusiast in all areas of motorsport or general motor. Oh, so you did write motorsport, so 100% yes. And if you don't, and your competitors are, then you know, maybe you're missing out there. Will the agency be full if I don't join now? Well, it will be closed. However many we get, and we're taking a maximum of 10 or closing it. Yes, it will be closed now. If you want to call the team and talk to them, you know, if there's something you need to sort around with your payment or you've got a couple of questions, you can do that. You've actually got a little bit more time now because I've got about 5 cards here, but get that done. But yes, it will be closing 100%. You need to have at least spoken to the team and, you know, asked them your questions and made yourself known to them. Can I use my podcast content to write my book? Yeah. You plan, I think I covered this, you know, you create your concept of your book, I'm Worth More. You create your concept of your subtitle, realize your value, unleash your potential. You create the 30 or 40 chapters, so self-worth, self-value, the concept of value, self-confidence, self-worth around your pricing, self-worth in your relationships, self-sabotage. You know, I could go on and on and on, break it into sections, and then I just do a podcast on each one of those sections. Yeah. And then in 30 or 40 weeks or 30 or 40 episodes, I send all them out to a transcriber, and I have the framework of a book.
Can I just add to
Please.
that? I mean, when we talk at the masterclass, I honestly say to the people there, even if you never had a listener to your podcast, I still think it's worth doing because of how much you can repurpose that content and the like having really high quality show notes. Jay, if he didn't say it when he did his interview, we write show notes for Jay's podcast and we have a professional copywriter listen to his episode and then write what the highlights are, what the key quotes were, what the key takeaways were. And he uses that content for his blog, for all of his social media. He then is banking that content for other things. So if you're doing it right and you're repurposing the right way, even if you never had a listener, you're getting them, you know, it's still worth having a podcast. Yeah. So everything on top of that is like a bonus. Yeah. It's great. Like, you know, I really believe that because it's so much easier to just speak content for half an hour than it is to write 4,000 words, 5,000 words.
It's almost like having a server that you can then use and leverage content. That's a very good point. Will the book writing bootcamp help me decide on a concept for a book? I won't let you come to the book writing bootcamp until we've decided on your concept for a book. So that's part of the prep. Because the book writing bootcamp, it's not one of these sort of like, oh, let's sit and plan a book. Let's talk about your concept, your title, or let's talk about the framework and the chapters and do some research. You do all that before with some ding-donging and support from me. The book writing bootcamp is where you write your book. I'm not going to say it's going to be 100% fun. It's fun at 6 o'clock in the evening when you stop writing your book and you have dinner. But I will get you writing between 1,000 and 3,000 words every 20 minutes with about a 5-minute break, and then rounds of 3 with about a 30-minute break, and we just go all out. So I am a bit of a Hitler book writing boot camper, but you've got to come back with a book, because if you come back with half a book, what's the point? There's people who run book writing courses. I write a book writing boot camp, and I only do it once a year, and you have a book when you're back, and I'm on your back.
I've seen the guys after that, they're destroyed.
Yeah, but they have a book out.
I don't think anyone enjoys it, but they appreciate it.
That's one way of looking at it, yeah. How do you deal with a guest who is giving one-word answers? Have better questions. That would be one. It would be spend time with them, creating some rapport. I have never had a guest with one-word answers. Do you remember when Ronnie O'Sullivan was pissed off with the Snooker Association and he did this funny little squeaks and noises in an interview, and he just gave one words and did impressions and didn't do a proper interview? That reminded me of that. But like, this is weird because I've never seen any guests or heard any podcasts where the guests have done one-word interviews.
I think if you...
Is that a feature or is that something that someone has had?
I don't know, but I think if you struggle with it, I think something we've talked about for when you're doing interviewing is don't kind of fear the silence. Because sometimes you can ask a question and someone gives a one-word answer and then you just keep waiting and then they'll go, well, and then they'll launch into the full answer, and you can kind of let them off the hook if you jump in with the next question.
That's a
so
good
you've got to let that
if they
silence...
say one-word answer...
Just wait.
And then you'll get another word. And then you get two-word answers. Great, but that is a very good point. In the early days, if you listen to my podcast, where I was not very experienced and maybe not my best, that's kind to myself, where I was not very good, I feared the silence. So I would think people had finished, I'd be like, my question, I'd chuck it in, and they hadn't finished, and I wasn't letting them breathe, and so then I would talk over them when they would talk over me, and it was obviously not on purpose, I was just maybe a bit nervous and feared the silence. So sitting there and fearing the silence, and not even going, or thank you, or ooh, but just sitting in silence is obviously a bit of an overwhelming thing if you've got a big guest there, but it's very powerful because they will just keep divulging things if you just look at them. Do you think public speaking is a required skill? I think it's an additional skill that helps, but here's the interesting thing. I thought, because I've got a lot of public speaking experience, that I don't need to learn about podcasting and the speaking for a podcast. I can interview people. I've interviewed hundreds of people on stage, but interviewing people for a podcast is quite an individual thing, and speaking on a podcast is quite an individual thing. So I would say it will help you a bit, but it's not a prerequisite. And actually the skill of speaking on a podcast and your tonality and how you use your voice inflection, because you haven't really got your body language, and then in interview situations where you mostly want to be silent and you're really rapport building, I would say it's not really going to hurt you if you haven't got any public speaking experience. Of course, if you're absolutely petrified of speaking, then start doing the podcast on your own, on your microphone in your own room, where we edit them, and then build up towards interviewing someone.
I think that's it.
Boom. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So 01733898557, you've got about 10 seconds to call that number if you want to be considered for our Starter Pro or Studio Pro podcast media agency packages. Remember, also you have the chance to get the Podcast Media Masterclass if you weren't on yesterday, or you will wait until today to see what the agency offer was. So we'll give you 5 seconds to do that. 4, 3, 2, 1. And remember, if you don't risk anything, you risk everything. Thanks for tuning in.
Hi everyone, it's Felicity from Progressive here, and today I'm going to show you how to set up your basic podcast gear. First thing you want to make sure you do is make sure that here on the Zoom we've got a button for mic and a button for 1 and 2. You want to make sure that your Zoom is set for channels 1 and 2, because this means that it will use the microphones that you plug in and not the internal mic on the Zoom. The next thing to do is to put your SD card in. Get your card, turn the Zoom on its side, and you'll see we've got a little slot just here, which is where the SD card goes. Just get a fingernail or something in there, open the slot, and then you want to put your SD card in. So, as you can see on the screen here, it's asking us if we want to format the card. If it's the first time putting the card in your recorder, you want to select yes. If you turn it on its side again, you can see we've got this little scroll wheel here. That will allow you to switch between options on your screen, and if you press it, that will select the option that you're currently highlighting. So next we're just going to go into the settings on the recorder. So again, turn it on its side. Menu button is here, just below your scroll wheel. Press the menu button, and we're now in the recorder's menu. Our first setting to go through on the settings menu is to put your recording in the right folder. So we recommend, just for ease of access and because you'll remember where it is, you want to go into your folder menu, just click the wheel to put it in folder 1, because then you'll remember where you've put all your recordings. Back into the menu, and we're going to scroll down to input, click your wheel and we'll go into the input menu. Now, if you scroll down through these and you get to an option called Level Auto. Now, you want to make sure that this setting is switched off, because if it's on, it means you won't be able to alter the audio levels on your recorder. So always make sure this is switched off. The next setting we want to do is mono mix. So again, scroll your wheel down and we've got mono mix switched on. When you're doing a solo recording, you need to keep this setting on. So we're just going to go through the final setting in the input menu of your recorder. So if you scroll down from mono mix, we've got your phantom power. So phantom power basically is just there to power your microphones. Now, always consult the manual of whatever microphone you've got. In our instance, our Behringer C1 microphone takes 48 volts, but our Rode NT1 only takes 12 volts. So just make sure you've got the right setting. And again, click on your phantom power option and you want to scroll it to the right setting. So we're now just going to go out of your input settings menu and into the recording menu. So to do this, just want to go back on the side, hit menu again, scroll your wheel down, and we go into the recording menu. So we need to make sure that the recording format is in the right setting. We want to click into record format and we want to scroll down to WAV 48,000 Hertz at 24-bit. So now we've got all the right settings. We want to go back out of the menu. I'm just going to take you through the settings on the main screen now. Right at the top here, we've got your time code. This will start going up when we start recording, but for now it's just set to 0. Here in the corner is your battery level. We've then got your left and right audio channels. Again, when we start plugging in a microphone and recording, you'll see these going up and down. And down here, we can see that we've got 7 hours of recording time because we've got an 8GB card in. Obviously, the bigger file size your card can manage, the longer you can record for. So now we've gone through all the settings, it's time to plug our kit in. So we're going to plug our male XLR lead into the recorder. We're then going to get the other end of our XLR cable into the bottom of our Behringer microphone. Next, we're going to put the pop shield on your microphone, and you want to angle the pop shield so it's nice and sturdy, it's not going to slip. So now we're going to plug our headphones into our recorder, and our headphone jack is just here. So slot that in, make sure it clicks, and now we're going to hit record. So now we're just going to turn our recording level up, and your recording level is just here. And we just want to make sure that our input is set to about 80. And we're going to do volume control. So volume is basically just the audio that you can hear in your headphones. And we want to make sure this is set at the same level as your recording level. And there we go, that's also set to 80. So a moment ago I pressed record, but at the moment we've got our record lights flashing. So this just basically means that it's not recording, but you've prepared your recorder to start recording. So we can see our audio levels here. So we've got a left and right channel, and because we're doing a solo recording and it's mono mix, they're both equally going up and down. When you're recording, your levels want to be hitting about the -6. You can just see your -6 level here. Now that's the ideal level you want. You don't really want any quieter, then you don't want any louder, because otherwise it will start to peak, and that will mean that your microphone starts distorting and it just doesn't make your audio sound very good. So when you're happy with your audio levels, you want to hit record again. And now you'll notice that our flashing red light has changed to a solid red light. And we can also now see that our time code is starting to go up. So therefore we are now recording audio into our microphone. When you've finished your recording, just press the stop button. And that will process, and that is now saved as a file on your SD card. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found that really useful. If you have any questions at all, don't forget you can always comment in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
So your podcast artwork. So this is the only really kind of like non-audio thing you need to have before you can absolutely start. So they're tiny. If you've used like the iTunes app, who uses the podcast app on their phone to listen to podcasts? So you'll know, like, it's about, at the biggest, when you see it on your phone, it's about the size of a postage stamp. And at worst, it's like the size of like something much smaller than a postage stamp. So nothing complicated, nothing like overly elaborate, not lots of like textures and gradients. You want to keep it very, very, very simple. If you're unsure, open the app now. I'm sure the majority of you here have iPhones. Have a look in the podcast app and you'll see how tiny they are. You're not going to have a lot of space for many, many words. You're not going to have space for a subtitle. You're going to be lucky if you've got space to put your name on there as well. So when you're talking about your podcast, you want to keep your title nice and short so you can make your thumbnail big, striking, colourful. Have a look at other people in the kind of sector that you're trying to want to put your podcast in, and you can decide whether you want to contrast with them or complement them. That's up to you. So when I say it should be readable at about 200 pixel wide, what I mean there is if, for example, you were making it yourself in Photoshop or your own, software or whatever, shrink it down till it is 200 pixels wide on your screen. And if you can't read everything on there, you need to do it again. Podcast's going to be on. Wellbeing, okay, brilliant. So you and all the other wellbeing podcasts will use similar search terms and keywords. So when they search for them, you will also appear in the results. So you want something that stands out from what other people in your field are doing. Yeah, so look at what other people are doing and then try and do something that is different but still appealing. But I'd say keep it really, really simple. We're all scrolling through lists all the time. You realistically, it's a pretty simple formula. You probably want 3 to 4 words. You want a big sans serif font, which means no curly bits. You want it to take up the whole screen. You want a color on the background. And that's what you want to look for. And look at what people are doing and then do something opposed to that so that you stand out.
Hello everybody, my name's Ben and today I'm going to be walking you through exporting one MP3 ready to go out to the world. So now we're at the point where if I was completely happy with this, I just want to save the file. So it's very important at this point to underline the fact that you want to save your project and then save your file as an MP3. They're quite different. So I want to go File, Save Project as, and then let's call this podcast episode 1 and we'll call it master edit, for example. And where it's in our original file from our desktop, click save, and that's saved. So that is like saving a Word document before saving it to PDF. So you can always go back and edit that Word document, and it's the same with this. You can always come back and edit this. It will be exactly the way you left it. So now we need to export your MP3. That is the file that your audience will be able to download. That is the file that they will be listening to. So File, Export, Export as MP3. So we'll click that. And let's call this podcast episode 1 final. Where? Let's put it in on the desktop in episode 1. So if you just follow along with these, you could do this on any editing software, but these rough settings will get you a really high quality output file. So MP3, bitrate mode constant, quality 192 kbps, and then on your channel mode just hit stereo, and if you do that then you'll get a good quality sound. So let's hit save, and this little box will come up, and all it's telling you is that it's going to compress all of these files into one track, and one stereo track, and that's what you want. So we're going to hit OK. So again, this won't affect your edit. This only affects the output of this next file which we're about to make. So don't worry about losing control of your main project file. So, okay. So this is metadata, this bit. This is everything that will pop up in your file. So if you went to download a song on iTunes, for example, it would have all of this extra data. So it's up to you how much you fill this in. Fill as much as you like or as little. So I'll just put the basics. So podcast ep 1, but this is what will be seen by all of your podcast listeners. So I'd recommend filling it in correctly. So I won't put ep, I'll put episode 1. Year, it's actually 2018. We'll get rid of that, we don't need that. encoded by, let's get rid of that. So let's call it the podcast because I'm original. That is all the information I really want to provide. Don't feel you need to do anything more than that. I mean, you could just have the title. You don't need anything, but it's up to you. So I'm going to say OK. And it is now exporting to MP3. And as you can see, audio doesn't take very long. And that's done. So if I just go back to my desktop and go back to where I saved, it's at podcast episode 1. And you can see here, podcast episode 1 final MP3. And it's a really tiny file, 2.6 megabytes. So let's have a look. If I just open that, listen.
That's actually good. And I hope to never interview you again. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay. Okay, there you go. So this is the file you would then take and upload to the internet for the world to see.
Who here is going to use music in their production? Yeah, your intro, something like that. Is anyone do it like a music themed podcast? No? Well, music is a very important part of any audio production, particularly for your intros, your outros. You want to be using music. Now, there's a lot of legal things. I'm not going to bore you to death with all of it. But there's specific things and guidelines you have to go through to make sure that your production is legal and you're not going to get sued, which definitely, I don't think anyone wants that. So you can't use chart music and popular music, stuff like that. Well, you can, but, and there's a big question mark over this, you have to pay royalties and a big fee. So yeah, you can have Queen Don't Stop Me Now as your intro music, fine. But you probably got to pay about £5,000 per episode every time you air that. Unless you've got £5,000 spare to spend that, I probably wouldn't really recommend you do that. So what's the alternative? Royalty-free music and Creative Commons. Has anyone heard of royalty-free Creative Commons before? Yeah? Does everyone know the difference between royalty-free and Creative Commons? Okay, so just to explain it for people who don't know, royalty-free means you don't pay a royalty on it. It's royalty-free, so you pay for the product once. So for instance, our Disruptive Entrepreneur, we found the music on, I can't remember what specific website it was, Tom found it, but we paid about £70 for the license of that specific song. So an artist created that song, the Disruptive Entrepreneur music, they put it on this site, they have a fee of £70 and we paid that. Now we can use that music as much as we like on any project we want because we purchased the license basically to that. So that basically means going forward we don't have to pay a royalty. So now we've done 231 episodes of Disruptive Entrepreneur, I believe, and we only had to pay £70 for the music and we've used it in every single episode, intros, outros, even videos as well, linking to the brand of Disruptive Entrepreneur. But Creative Commons is music that the artist is creating and publishing for free. However, there's normally disclaimers within that. So some artists won't want their work used on commercial use. They will want to be paid for that, and that links to royalty free. But some just want to create music and kind of get their name out there. And what you'll have to do normally, it all depends on the specific artist and the specific criteria they put in place, but they will normally want a credit. So who here watches a lot of YouTube videos, any type of YouTube content? A lot of people. Has anyone got on a YouTube video and you've got on the description, at the very bottom of the description it says music by whoever, Joe Blogs, Creative Commons. Has anyone noticed that before? So that's people who have got permission to use that track, but all they need to do is credit the artist. So Joe Blogs at joeblogs.com, whatever it is like that. So that's a way of getting free music. Again, quality doesn't mean it's particularly that good. You get what you pay for. You're always going to get better quality product by paying for it, but you can get free music, use it as much as you want, but you always have to read the terms and conditions.
So we use Omni Studio for hosting. We've always used Omni Studio. So when I talk about other hosting platforms, I don't have personal experience with them. That is because we've had such a good experience with Omni Studio, we've never needed to go anywhere else. They were a small startup when we started working with them about 2 years ago. They're now quite a big company. They've got partnerships with Apple and Spotify. They host all sorts of audio. Their publishing tools are really, really good. They're very intuitive, and one of the reasons we use them is because when we started, we knew nothing about podcasts, so I needed to find a platform that was easy for me to find and use and publish everything on. Their support is awesome. They have one-on-one like chat support, and you can just log in straight away, ask questions, people answer them straight away. Storage is a really important one here. So when we talk about storage, there's two things, there's two parts of storage. And obviously some of you who are a bit more techie will know this really easily, but I'll explain it anyway. There's the information that they're storing for you, and then there's the information they're serving for you. So there's storage and there's bandwidth. So if you have 10 episodes that are 30 megabytes each, they are storing 300 megabytes of data for you. If 1,000 people listen to your 30 megabyte podcast, that's 3 gigabytes of data bandwidth you've used. So we use Omni Studio, and it's on the more expensive side of $99 a month for hosting, but it has completely unlimited storage and bandwidth. Some of the others you'll find, like Libsyn, stuff like that, they have very cheap opening tiers, but they will very quickly become expensive with bandwidth, which means when you start your podcast and you've got, 10 episodes and, 50 listeners, you'll be like, oh, this is awesome, I'm only paying like £10 a month. But you'll very quickly, potentially, if you grow, as I imagine all of you do, get hit with some big data fees, and they can charge you, quite a bit per like megabyte that you use. So you've got your storage, you've got your bandwidth, and you want to make sure that you're getting a plan that works for you. So for us, we have lots, we serve lots, so unlimited works perfectly for us. Omni Studio is $99 a month, but for us it's worth it because we never have to think about that data. We never have to think about that. So that's Omni Studio. So we use them for everything. They, as Rob mentioned yesterday, we're meeting up with Mitch Secret, who's their business development manager, because they do some really exciting things, because they're starting to do more and more other kind of hosting services now, which is exciting. So there are some other platforms, like I mentioned. We haven't got personal experience with them. I know of them. I've researched all of them before we chose Omni Studio. Some are cheaper, but I can't vouch for them. There might be some out there better than Omni Studio, but I'm telling you what we have experience with, what works for us, and what's grown us from 0 to, across all 4 of our podcasts, all 3 of our main podcasts, over, 400 episodes now. And Omni Studio has never dropped a beat with us. But pick what suits your needs. If you find another one that works for you, test it, give it a go. They're all generally pay monthly with free cancellations. They don't normally tie you into like big continuity programs. So if you want to test another one, do it. Just beware that it can be hard to move a feed from one channel, one service to another. If you start on, say, Libsyn as an example, and you do your first 20 episodes on Libsyn, and then you decide, actually, I want to use Omni Studio, it is not an easy process always to move successfully of your data from one hosting platform to another without having to restart your podcast from scratch. Because, of course, they don't want you to. They want you to stay on Libsyn forever. That's beneficial to them.